photos of bloody and dismembered children. Once again, the noise and hostility and the visual elements of these agitators was inescapable both outside and inside of our sanctuary. Easter is supposed to be the most joyous occasion for Christians. We had planned children's activities outside in our parking lot, which include a bouncy obstacle course, animal petting zoo, Easter crafts, stories about Jesus. But we had to bring these children inside for their physical and emotional safety. As a matter of fact, hundreds of children were impacted literally to the point of frantic crying because of the hostile noise and the aggression of these agitators. Even inside their Sunday school classrooms, there was no escape from the blaring sirens and deafening chants. Many first-time guests drove away instead of being able to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ proclaimed at our Easter services. Our religious liberty to proclaim Jesus as Lord was hindered and obstructed by these agitators. After we peacefully invited amicable discussion, the agitators threatened to come back on Mother's Day, and then again, prompting us to retain First Liberty Counsel and send a warning letter. Yet again, these same agitators returned to disrupt our next service with the Christian and Jewish Alliance on September 7th.
On September 7th, we planned an interfaith worship service bringing multiple synagogues and churches together. We met at the Legacy International Center, a Christian venue that regularly hosts worship services and is also supportive of Israel. I thought it would be a safe space for Jews and Christians to worship there together. We invited rabbis and pastors to pray and speak, and we sang in both Hebrew and English. We did not advertise the event publicly, but invited only our distribution list. Over 480 guests registered. But right before the doors opened, the center staff came to me to say, "They're here." I looked up and saw angry disruptors dressed in black, wearing face masks, waving the Palestinian flag on the sidewalk right outside of the event space. They laid down dolls along the driveway so that guests had to drive over the dolls as the agitators screamed baby killers at them through their megaphones. My friends Ruth, Stephanie, and Marka all are devout Jews whose worship experience that day was ruined, and I'd like to share their stories. As Ruth and her husband was driving into the event in their small car, agitators blocked the entrance, blaring sirens and shouting angry chants through bullhorns. Several disruptors were swarming back and forth across the driveway, holding signs with swastikas and blocking cars with their bodies. When Ruth pulled up, a pink-haired woman wearing a full black face mask jumped onto the hood of her car, screaming and banging on her windshield. When my friend Marka tried to drive in, the agitators blocked her car too. On foot, she tried to ask the agitators to get off the private property, and 4 or 5 of them then surrounded her, shoving their bullhorn into her face and aggressively filming her on their phones. She only escaped because our friend Rodney put himself in harm's way to protect her. The police did nothing to stop the harassers. When my friend Stephanie pulled up in her car, she was blocked, and her car was swarmed by agitators. One disruptor announced over a bullhorn, "Next, we have the House of Israel president. She is super racist and super hateful." Another agitator screamed at her to get out of the car and fight, while a third smacked her car window and tried to shove a sign inside of it. The disruptors were so aggressive that many guests drove away altogether. Over 100 guests who registered did not attend. Once the worship service started, the disruptors banged drums and blared sirens the entire time. The sirens were so loud that they almost drowned out our speakers, impeding on our right to free speech. Many guests had ringing in their ears for days after the event. After the event, 2 of the speakers and I were followed by a parked car that was obviously waiting for us. For safety, we had to run into the lobby as the car sped off. Scared, we needed a security guard to walk us to our car. All we wanted was to gather safely, pray, and worship together. This is what anti-Semitism looks like today. This is happening not just in San Diego, but all over the country. In 2019, President Trump signed an executive order adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, also known as IHRA, which states, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and/or their property, towards Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. That is exactly what we are experiencing. The agitators express hate towards us at our worship services, intimidating, obstructing, and interfering with our free exercise. They targeted our Christian friends and allies, trying to isolate us by punishing anyone who dares to support us. When people of different faiths come together in worship and unity, this helps to diffuse conflict and overcome hatred. Our efforts should be celebrated and not vilified. Because we refuse to be scared into silence, we are planning our next event together, and it will be beautiful. But we need protection to ensure everyone's safety. In closing, I have 3 recommendations for the Commission to consider. First, school boards need to adopt IHRA to teach accurate definitions of anti-Semitism and to ensure that school staff and the younger generation understand how it manifests today. Similarly, IHRA needs to be adopted in city governments so that local police forces receive proper training on how to recognize anti-Semitism and how to enforce existing laws so that ministries like ours can receive meaningful protection. Finally, I suggest that the local police forces receive training on how to address protests that cross the line into harassment, aggression, and violence. Thank you for considering these important issues and for this opportunity to share our stories.
Well, thank you.
I have one more go, Dr. Carson, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I didn't ever think I'd be asking Dr. Carson for permission to keep speaking. I would echo Liat's recommendations and add 2 more. We need consistent enforcement of existing laws. They are there for a reason. But we also need additional laws to protect public places of worship. For example, the FACE Act's provision protecting places of religious worship should be codified separately into federal law. You see, the disruptions have deeply impacted our church, which has taken major safety precautions. Our members literally face this difficult choice: to suppress their voices to support Israel, or to risk their own safety to stand for biblical truth. God's word calls Jesus' church to support Israel and her people. Our conviction comes from both the Old Testament and the New Testament, but specifically Genesis and Deuteronomy, when God makes an everlasting and unconditional covenant with Abraham and the nation of Israel to be his light to the nations, setting his love upon his chosen people. The Bible teaches that God loves when his people are protected by others, even at their own expense when they stand with Israel. The Mission Church takes God's words to Abraham seriously. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. I would encourage my brothers and sisters in the evangelical Protestant world, if your current theology has somehow taught you not to stand with Israel, read your Bible. Rethink your position. Bruce Pearl said it well. Replacement theology is dangerous because it puts the Jews on the outside of what God's promise clearly said. And God is not a man that can lie. He is faithful to his covenant forever and everlasting. To translate these beliefs into application, we as shepherds of the Mission Church faithfully teach our members the whole counsel of the Bible. And we provide opportunities for our congregation to help them understand the modern day problems that are facing Jews, both domestically and abroad. As difficult as the safety concerns are, the deepest harm comes in the form of fear and oppression. Behind the agitators and their volatile chaos is a pointed message. Israel is the real enemy. And if you stand with them, we will silence you and shame you even in the sacred spaces where you worship. The agitators have directly attacked our Christian faith. This harmful ideology has seeped even into our own church, especially among young people. The most concerning element is not whether our church members are willing to stand for truth in the face of opposition. It's when truth is manipulated by fear of violence associated in standing with our Jewish neighbors against anti-Semitism, which is why anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem. Anti-Semitism is everyone's problem because it is an assault on religious liberty. We cannot let the agitators, the influencers, or even anti-Semitic rhetoric disguised as academic rhetoric scare us into silence. God clearly calls the church to support the Jewish community, and it should be our honor to faithfully do so for the Jew first and then for the Gentile. God's church cannot be silent while Jews are facing anti-Semitic attacks. That's why we retain First Liberty Institute in Jones Day. And together with the Alliance and our friend Ruth Mastrom, we filed a federal lawsuit in November of 2025. The FACE Act should protect every place of worship in America from interference by agitators seeking to disrupt our free exercise of religion. In closing, we are so thankful for this commission's courageous commitment to protecting religious freedom. We're thankful for the Attorney General and Assistant Attorney General and the many others who are defending people of faith in Minnesota, in New Jersey, in California, and across this great nation. We are hopeful that the United States government will stand with us too, so that our right to worship will be protected and existing laws will be enforced not only at a federal level, but at the state and the local levels where people like us on the West Coast struggle. The freedom to worship without fear of persecution is sacred, especially at a time when Jews and Christians undeniably are under attack. Thank you for listening to our story. May the light shine brighter in the dark than the darkness as we stand together against anti-Semitism and commission. May God bless you with all his wisdom and boldness. Thank you.
We appreciate the courage that you two have exhibited in light of so much opposition. Now we'd like to hear from Dr. Glick.
Thank you, Chairman, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and Vice Chair Dr. Carson, and esteemed members of the Religious Liberties Commission. Good morning. My name is Moshe Glick. I'm a father of 3, grandfather of 4, dentist from West Orange, New Jersey, and I'm likely the only panelist here who has been arrested, charged with 4 felonies that could have meant over 10 years in prison. You can't really call yourself a civil rights activist until you felt the cold steel of handcuffs close around your wrists, stood defiantly for the mugshot, and been fingerprinted like a common criminal. My crime? Defending a 64-year-old man from a violent assault during an unauthorized protest that blocked and intimidated worshipers at Congregation Or Torah in West Orange, New Jersey on November 13th, 2024. Pro-Hamas agitators disrupted a peaceful Jewish-Christian gathering, praying for peace in Israel, the safe return of the hostages from Gaza, reciting psalms and biblical verses, and exploring purchasing a home in Israel. One protester, Altaf Sharif, ignored police orders, charged past officers, seized an individual who turned out to be 64-year-old David Silberberg in a life-threatening chokehold, body slammed him to the ground, all captured on video, then provided false verbal and written statements to the police. Mr. Sharif faced no charges. The police didn't even investigate. When my attorney pressed the Essex County Prosecutor's Office in New Jersey, the response was chilling. No one else was investigated because no one else committed a crime, only your client. This, despite clear video evidence of a violent hate crime being submitted to the prosecutor's office and the assault being fully reported and documented in the official West Orange Police Department incident report. Video evidence initially suppressed by West Orange Police clearly showed the assault, deception, and targeted disruption of Jewish religious life. This is the hallmark of a weaponized justice system, one that buries evidence to serve an agenda. In stark contrast, I, the one who stepped in to stop a brutal assault, was the only one arrested. I repeatedly pleaded for the police to help, but they did nothing. As a doctor and volunteer EMT, I recognized late signs of a constricted airway, his legs buckling, a critical indicator of impending loss of consciousness. Only then, after all other attempts fail, did I use the small 6-inch flashlight I was carrying to illuminate the dark area that night to intervene and free him by aiming to tap Mr. Sharif on the back. Rogue local prosecutors selectively targeted me, the Jewish event organizer, while letting the video-recorded aggressor walk free. I faced 4 felony charges, including second-degree bias intimidation, third-degree aggravated assault, and 2 weapons offenses related to the flashlight. I was indicted twice. The first indictment was so procedurally flawed, the prosecutors abandoned it. A law-abiding citizen, volunteer EMT, nonprofit co-founder, and philanthropist with 0 criminal record, suddenly stared into an abyss. Years in prison, the potential loss of my dental license, the separation from my wife, children, and grandchildren, my faith in America's justice system was utterly shattered. I rejected a diversionary program, pretrial intervention, because that would mean a tacit admission that I had done something wrong for defending an individual from a vicious assault. I fought for truth, for justice, for the principle that defending others from hatred must never be criminalized. This battle came at a great cost, financially, mentally, and spiritually, and had a heavy impact on my family. We all paid a huge price. Just over 2 weeks ago, on his final day in office, January 20th, 2026, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy granted me a full pardon. I was never convicted of a crime, and I am profoundly thankful to Governor Murphy. Heartfelt thanks to U.S. Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, Jonathan Gross, and Orlando Sanza at the Department of Justice for their landmark FACE Act complaint that exposed this injustice. Special recognition to Jonathan Gross, the DOJ attorney under Assistant Attorney General Dillon, whose foresight and fortitude brought the very first FACE Act case to protect houses of worship. He is the true hero, and without his courage, none of this would have been possible. And deep gratitude to Weil, Gotshal, and Mangus, led by partner Yehuda Bachweitz, for stepping up pro bono in October 2025 when others hesitated due to the taint of my criminal charges. If the Essex County, New Jersey prosecutor can weaponize the government against honest, hardworking citizens like me, shielding aggressors while targeting defenders, we are all in great peril. I therefore ask Attorney General Pam Bondi, Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, and the heroes working at the Department of Justice to investigate this matter fully. I am all in to help, providing evidence, testimony, or whatever is needed to ensure accountability and prevent such malicious prosecution and selective enforcement from happening to any other American. If police and prosecutors shield aggressors and criminalize defenders in these circumstances, what will happen to communities of faith all over this great nation? Jews have long been the canary in the coal mine. Whenever anti-Semitism rises, it's a sign that democratic values, religious tolerance, and civil liberties are in decline. I urge this commission to confront these egregious actions. Inverting justice risks normalizing anti-Semitism within law enforcement and turning the canary's silence into a dire warning for freedoms far beyond our community. History's warnings rings clear across the centuries. Societies that fail to protect their Jews, or worse, turn against them, often hasten their own decline. When anti-Semitism becomes policy or norm, it signals deeper erosion of democratic values, tolerance, and liberty. Ancient Egypt enslaved the Jews, oppressed them harshly, and defied their cries for freedom, only to be broken by devastating plagues that struck at the heart of its power. The once mighty empire, pinnacle of ancient civilization, was forever diminished, never regained its former glory. Babylon razed Jerusalem, exiled its people, and soon vanished from history's stage. Mighty Rome crushed the Jewish quest for self-rule, destroyed the temple, only to fade into the history books. Nazi Germany boasted a 1,000-year Reich rooted in hatred of the Jews, yet that hatred devoured it, collapsing in just 12 years by 1945. All four of my wife's grandparents survived the Shoah. Two endured Auschwitz, a testament that unchecked hatred devours its hosts. These are not coincidences. They form solemn, recurring patterns. Societies that oppress the Jewish people sow the seeds of their own erosion. History's timeless caution: defend the vulnerable or risk joining the shadows of fallen empires. The pattern is unmistakable. Yet deeper truth rooted in our shared heritage offers real hope. In Genesis 12:3, God declares, "I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all people on earth will be blessed through you." This is no mere verse, it is a divine law of history. Nations that bless the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, prosper. Those that curse them invite ruin. America's extraordinary success flows from its historic embrace of Judeo-Christian values and fierce protection of religious freedoms for all who seek to worship God. We cannot allow violent protesters and radicalization to threaten that divine blessing. I did not come here to beg for protection. I came to call for action. Divine deliverance for the Jewish people will come, as it always has over our 3,500-year history. But America faces a profound choice at this pivotal moment. Our founding fathers built this nation on the bedrock of the Hebrew Bible, drawing timeless principles of liberty, justice, and moral law from Scripture to shape the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the soul of American self-government. They saw in ancient Israel a divine model of equality under God, ideas that ignited the American experiment and invited Almighty God's favor. True patriots must stand united now to defend religious freedom for every American and every faith community, the sacred, God-given right to pray and worship without fear or favor. By upholding these biblical principles of liberty, freedom to worship God, and moral truth, we secure God's continued blessing on this nation, fortify its moral code, and ensure lasting prosperity for generations to come. I am no great rabbi or scholar. Some might say I'm not even a real doctor. But we Jews believe, that's a Seinfeld reference, but we Jews believe that sincere words from the heart carry weight and can summons heaven's grace. So I leave you with the ancient priestly blessing from Numbers 6:24. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'ir Adonai panavei lecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panavei lecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. May this blessing guide your work, steel your resolve, and protect all who stand against hatred. We cannot allow this to merely be a good meeting, one that ends with nice words, polite handshakes, and a handful of tweets that fade away. We stand at a pivotal moment in history, one that calls us to rise together. By addressing Jew hatred, anti-religious extremism, and all forces attacking those who worship God, with courage and clarity, we can safeguard the values that define our republic and secure a stronger, more unified future for all of America. I offer my assistance to this commission and the White House recommendations, implementation, whatever is needed. This is the hill I am willing to die on. God bless President Trump. God bless this great nation. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Thank you. I can assure you this is not going to be a commission that just finishes a report and no one ever reads it. The president will see it, and we intend to give him action points that we have learned from this, whether it's an executive order or action from Congress. So we are in this all the way. We didn't come this far to only come this far. Jonathan, you'll be our last witness here, and then we'll open up for questions.
Good morning, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vice Chairman and the esteemed panelists here today. One thing that is very clear from looking at me is that I am not Harmeet Dillon. She appreciated the invitation and asked Jonathan Gross to take her place. Unfortunately, he was not able to take her place, so I am John Mertens. But I am also part of the Civil Rights Division here at the Department of Justice, and I am personally very delighted to be here. Last year, I was a private attorney in the state of Utah and the outgoing president of our synagogue, the largest conservative and reform synagogue in the state of Utah. I will tell you that Utah is a great place to be Jewish. There is lots of community support from the state and the broader community of the citizens of Utah. And I want to thank them very much for making it such a great place to be Jewish. I also want to thank this administration, which has made anti-Semitism a priority. And the Civil Rights Division, of which I'm a part, will of course carry out the administration's priorities. We do have a number of open investigations into topics like the topics that we've been hearing about this morning. And I was personally inspired to join the department because of these priorities. They've allowed me to serve the Jewish community and the United States as a fighter and an advocate against anti-Semitism and for the spread of civil rights, one of the greatest triumphs of our country. With the support of this commission, with the support of the administration, the Civil Rights Division will continue the fight for religious liberty. And I will add that if you are listening to this and would like a job that's as fun as my job, please look at usajobs.gov because we need more fighters. With that, I was a last-minute addition to this panel, so I do not have further remarks, but I'm very happy to listen to and respond to questions from this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being the substitute for the substitute. There we go. Any question, members, for anyone? Kelly?
First, thank you, Ms. Cohen-Reese and Pastor Cooper for continuing to stand. I think most people in the country had no idea there was an invasion of a church before what they saw in Minnesota. So this is a disturbing trend. This is kind of a new approach. And I know you've got a civil suit. I'm hoping the Justice Department will, because FACE, Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, protects our houses of worship, both on the criminal side and on the civil side, and it would be up to the government. I guess you haven't heard anything yet as to whether the Department of Justice is going to bring a case. Well, I hope they will. But thank you for standing, for fighting, because the precedent you set in your case is going to help churches and synagogues and houses of worship all over the country. So thank you.
Anyone else? Carrie?
Yeah, I was just curious, who was the speaker that you had at your congregation, Pastor?
It was Dr. Einat Wilf.
Okay. Is she a Christian?
She is not a Christian.
Okay. What religion is she?
She is born Jewish, but she is an atheist on her own.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. May I ask you a question? Sure. In the last panel, you mentioned that as a Catholic, there was Bible prophecy or a lack of Bible prophecy that referred to the support of the Jewish nation. Can you reference where that is in the Catholic scriptures?
Oh, well, you do that as an evangelical Christian Zionist. You support the political state of Israel because you believe that is biblical prophecy, and we as Catholics do not.
Can you tell me where that is in the Catholic Bible?
We
Because I
want to
do
have a theological discussion. This is a
I'm
religious
simply-
liberty hearing, so I don't know why we're talking about theology.
Because you brought
Your
it up in the
theology is
last
different
panel.
than my theology.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, so are we going to have a theological discussion right now?
I'll leave that up to Lieutenant Governor.
You may answer the question if you like. This is not the purpose of the committee, but I want to be sure you have your rights to ask the questions and give your opinions. I will stop it at some point.
Thank you. Yeah, so what is the definition? I think that's important that we define what is anti-Semitism to you.
Anti-Semitism would be the prejudice and or the oppression of the Jewish people at any level, which includes their extermination or singling them out simply because they are born Jewish.
Okay, so as a pastor, are you worried or concerned at all that certain parts of the Bible, particularly the New Testament, would be considered anti-Semitic, specifically to referring the killing and crucifixion of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
Why would that be anti-Semitic? That is simply a fact
Well,
that the Jewish
according
people... Can
to
I
the
finish? May I please
IHRA
finish when you ask me a
Yeah, go
question?
ahead.
When Jesus was crucified, it was most definitely at the hand of the Jews and of the Romans.
That would be considered anti-Semitism under IHRA. Are you aware of that?
If
So
we're
you're
talking
making an
about-
anti-Semitic
if we're
remark
talking
right now.
about 2,000 years ago, this is biblical history.
Yeah, that's under the
And yet
definition
this
of
is the beauty.
anti-Semitism.
This is the beauty of God's faithfulness, is he made a covenant with Abraham, and God is not a man that he would lie. And so when he blesses a people, that blessing continues eternally.
Well, that's your theological perspective. That's not for 2,000 years the belief of the Catholic Church.
And
I think you should remain quiet and respect this hearing.
No outcry from the audience, please. Carrie, I think
Thank you.
we've had this discussion.
I did invite it. It's my fault. I apologize.
No, I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And I'm from San Diego. I live there.
And
We should get
Sanitas,
coffee.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Do you surf?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, I'll take you surfing then.
Okay.
Thank you. For the record, the Holy See established formal diplomatic relations with Israel in 1993. Agreements between the two explicitly recognize each other's legitimate roles as state and church authorities. For example, the Holy See and Israel jointly affirmed each other's rights to operate and protect their communities and institutions, just for the record. Panel, thank you. Thank you very much.
And they also condemn the genocide in Gaza.
Thank you, panel. Thank you very much.
So there's two more commissions, one in March, one in April. They must submit it to the report to the president, and then we open again the commission for after again if they want to follow to continue with it. Antenna.
Thank you for coming. As we have done, all four of you will speak, and Seth, we expect something humorous today from you. I just want to let you know. So the pressure's on for you, and we'll start with someone I've been on Fox with many times, but we've actually never met in person. So Leo Terrell.
Thank you, Chairman, Lieutenant Governor Patrick. And yes, we have been on Fox numerous times. It's a privilege to meet you in person. And thank you, Commission. I've had the privilege to listen to all the panels today and the questions. I think it's very important that you have solutions. And let me tell you right now, the solution is what we do at 30,000 feet, it's a local issue. The issue of anti-Semitism is local. Every example you have heard today is at a school, is in a city, is in a district. That's the problem. And the federal government comes in, but we come in after the event. We're talking about issues that involves school districts, school superintendent when it comes to curriculum. It involves the local prosecutors at a UCLA that does not prosecute. It involves a mayor who doesn't send a message. So you have an unbelievable task. You're required to provide a report to the greatest president in my lifetime on what we can do to fight anti-Semitism. And the problem is on the streets in every city, in every county, in every state. And they have initial jurisdiction. I wanted to bring that to you as my recommendation before I get into my speech, because I listened to everything you said. I listened to all the questions. And when we talk about anti-Semitism, we talk about an issue that involves discriminatory treatment. Let me go back to another fact by just listening to you. We are here because of a unicorn, a president who cares about fighting for religious freedom. And we are tasked with trying to set up guardrails for the next administration, the next administration. President Trump is unique. That's why we're here. That's why we care. How do you put in place people after this commission, after this presidency, who cares just as much, who will follow through just as much? We care. I care. You care. That's the tough task that we have, because the laws are on the book. Oh, there's great federal law, tremendous federal law. It's the execution. It's the commitment to follow through. That is the million-dollar question. Because we will not be in this position, Chairman and Coach, Vice Chairman, forever. But we have a 3-year window, and I am committed by being head of the task force to combat anti-Semitism. It is a commitment that I take with tremendous pride. I think Pastor Paul knows that. 35 years as a civil rights attorney. A commitment to treat everyone fairly under state and federal law. Understanding the commitment of the Jewish community in this country. I've heard all the testimony. I was a history teacher, Chairman, before I became a lawyer. And I know the commitment of the Jewish community to make sure everyone's rights are given on an equal basis, and their commitment to helping others. For example, my history lesson tells me that the Jewish community helped create the NAACP in 1909, helping Black Americans get their rights. My teaching as a history teacher taught me that Jewish Americans walked side by side with Black Americans in the 60s to fight for their civil rights. And may I hark back to an unfortunate tragedy. Mississippi, June 1964. 2 Jewish activists, Warner and Goodman, lost their lives with a Black activist named Cheney, fighting for their civil rights. This is a no-brainer. This is an issue of right versus wrong. And it's wrong to have anti-Semitism in this country. We talk about the unfairness. The right of Jewish Americans, all they want are the same rights that we have. The right to worship at their synagogue, to go to school. Well, you know, being head of the task force to combat anti-Semitism, my phone rings every day. Every day. And one of the things that they bring up is the Jewish tax. What's the Jewish tax? Well, the Jewish tax is the exorbitant fee the Jewish community has to pay for security and protection to have a meeting at their synagogue or to walk the streets. It's the Jewish tax. It costs tens of thousands of dollars because they're not protected. And that is a problem that they have, a major problem. Oh, I've written letters to various mayors, and guess what? Guess how many responses I've gotten? 0. See, that's that local issue. That's that issue that is there that you have to work on. How do we use the power of this great administration down to the local level? I heard all the discussion about universities and colleges. Wrong target. And here's a target you should work on. I had a great meeting with the Labor Department. And it's not just Title VI and taking the funds away. How about a great law called Title VII? For what? Unions at the local school district level are anti-Semitic. Hijacking the unions. Hijacking the curriculum. Hijacking the lesson plans for K-12. That's our next agenda. The colleges and universities, I got some bad news. They've already been taken away. The next target is K-12, our young people. The lesson plans, Chairman, the objectives of those plans. They're teaching hate in K, first, second, third, fourth grade, right now as we speak. That's what my phone says every day when I get to my office. Every day. The hate that is being taught to our young people. You're not born to hate, you're taught to hate. And this is going on. You know, my job here as head of the task force to fight anti-Semitism, and may I say, thank you, President Trump, for giving me this job. Thank you, Pam Bondi, for giving me this job. And it's a commitment that I have that goes well beyond the term of this administration. This is a lifetime commitment. As a civil rights attorney, this is a lifetime commitment. You'll see me, Chairman, if I leave and go back to Fox, talking about this after. Because my freedom is contingent upon everyone in this great country to share in their right to have their own religious freedom. A few other notes, and I'm passing it to my partner to the left. People say, why do I care? May I say to you, I am proud to be a Black Baptist. No, I'm not Jewish. This is not a Jewish issue. It's an American issue. It's a Western civilization issue. We are all obligated. I just came back from Israel last week, and I spoke to a great person who is also non-Jewish. His name is Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Love Mike Huckabee. You see, we have to expand this fight because our freedom is at stake. And so we have an obligation. I'm talking to the choir to expand this base. And when people say to me, hey, Leo, you're doing a great job as head of the task force, I said, if you know me, I said, no, I could do a lot more. There's a lot more we could do. I want to go back to that labor issue, that union issue. You can use Title VII against teachers' unions who are discriminating against Jewish teachers. Title VII. I learned that from sitting in a meeting with the Labor Department. There is so much we can do. So much. But it's not being utilized. And I will leave you with this. That people say, hey, you know, Leo, you're gonna lose a lot. You're out there, you're fighting for Jews to have the rights like you, and it's going to cost you a lot of opportunities. I'm willing to pay the price. It's a no-brainer, because I'm not going to shut up. Anti-Semitism is wrong, and you have an obligation, and we all have an obligation to do something about it. God bless America, God bless President Trump, and God bless you. Thank you.
Leo, tell us what you really think here.
When you and I go back on Fox, I will.
Okay. You are the right man for the job.
Thank you.
You are the right man
Thank
for the
you.
job.
Thank you.
And we're all committed long beyond this committee. We're all committed.
I know you are.
And all Americans should be committed. Our next witness, please introduce yourself.
I'd like to echo everything that Leo Terrell just said and also thank the Commission. It's an honor to be here. I'm an academic, so I had a specific purpose that I was invited here for, and that's to help the American audience understand the ideologies or parts thereof of anti-Semitism that negatively affect U.S. politics and, higher education, but there's a trickle-down effect, and undermine our freedoms, including religious liberty. And I say all of this in the context of that the long history of anti-Semitism should be over and in the past, but it is not. So my task first requires defining an often misunderstood term. Ideology is not just an idea or a set of ideas. It is not religious faith. It is not a political, economic, or social point of view. It is not a political party or movement, although either can be or become the vehicle of an ideology. What then is ideology? It is a fixed political worldview that holds within it a plan for fundamental societal change. Ideology is characterized by the belief that man's nature and thus society are malleable and can be remade and restructured repeatedly if necessary. Ideology is based in truth as defined and therefore relativized by itself, rather than permanent truth discovered through the harmony of reason and revelation, for example, as expressed in the American founding. Born during the reign of terror of the French Revolution, ideology fully formed in the modern era. The 20th century is the most destructive in human history in terms of war, tyranny, and injustice, much of that due to ideology. Not every ism is an ideology, and not all ideologies are totalitarian, but all ideologies are extreme in their agenda for fundamental societal change, whether or not they employ violence. While not technically needed, it can be helpful to place the modifier radical before the worst cases of ideology. My task next requires explaining anti-Semitic ideologies that have made their way, at least in part, to the United States, influencing almost a century of higher education and politics. Communism and Nazism have exerted the most impact. For these ideologies, think extremist in terms of intent and effect rather than far left or far right. By way of either Karl Marx and his heirs or Adolf Hitler and his adherents, these ideologies reject the God of revelation and are anti-Semitic. Historical, or what we might call conventional, prejudices against Jews on religious, racial, or other grounds may be still present. If so, these prejudices are exacerbated by ideology. So this is a problem on top of another problem in many cases. In US higher education, critical theory and its various offspring from the 1930s to the present benefited from following progressivism. Then through a highly adaptable cultural Marxism, They have entrenched themselves in the humanities, law, and social sciences. In this environment, increased polarization in contemporary America has manifested on campuses in viewpoint discrimination, political, religious, and/or philosophical, wokeism, whatever you want to call it, and other extremism. As an inflection point, October 7th exposed anti-Semitism, pre-existing and new, intellectual as well as activist, especially at elite universities. This academic anti-Semitic ideology deriving from communism is also present in elements of our body politic. Intellectual and activist agendas are sometimes mutually reinforcing. Since the 1960s, a porousness between higher education and politics has spread the effects and effectiveness of anti-Semitic ideology. Intellectually, cultural Marxism has co-opted identity, a word with concrete meaning for Jews. In activism, cultural Marxist ideology serves as justification for, and its tools are used in anti-Semitic demonstrations and attacks. Nazism's effects on US politics and higher education are much less intellectual and more scattered. They reach smaller populations with young, disaffected white men on everyone's minds these days. Such groups view Jews and other minorities as the impediment to their standing, if not supremacy. For visceral, more than academic reasons, young white supremacists have absorbed the identity distortion of cultural Marxism and joined it with prejudice, discontent, insecurity, and loneliness to prove their superiority. While the world is not their stage, they have microphones and mouthpieces and megaphones on social media. How should Americans respond to, reduce, and prevent anti-Semitic ideologies in politics and higher education? 1, correct information and non-ideological education are needed at all levels, K-12 through graduate school. Thank you. It's really important. It's all education. Nazism internalized and ideologized anti-Semitism. Communism is atheistic and anti-Semitic. We must undo the ideologizing. In tandem, we need a renaissance in hard news, just the facts. 2, a robust defense of religious liberty and respect for faith traditions are necessary. All of us here are involved in this endeavor, including you commissioners. 3, freedom of speech and civil discourse are essential in and of themselves and as supports of religious liberty. America 250 provides opportunities galore for all of these. Ending on a personal note, I am, perhaps like you, a 3F American: faith, family, freedom. I am also a native Washingtonian and Catholic, coming of age under John Paul II and Reagan. In this area at that time, Holocaust survivors visited all schools and witnessed. Today, I am chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. At VOC, our Witness Project tells the stories of victims who have survived communism. Too many, including Soviet refuseniks and other Jews, were twice victimized by communism. At this time, we need witnesses in schools, on campuses, and throughout the public square as part of the solution to combat anti-Semitic ideologies in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spaulding. I'm proud that this last year's session, that we passed legislation in Texas to teach communism and the horrors of communism in our schools.
Thank you.
I think we
now have
may.
several, yes,
I think we may be the
Florida,
leader
Texas,
on that. Florida and Texas.
Arizona.
Yep. There you
Thank
go.
you.
That's 47 states behind us.
I know.
Get on board.
That's right. That's
Father?
right.
Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the commission, my name is Father Tom Ferguson. I'm the pastor of Good Shepherd Catholic Church in Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm very grateful today to be here to offer these brief remarks as a statement of the Catholic Church's teaching regarding anti-Semitism. This past year, 2025, the Catholic Church celebrated the 60th anniversary of the conclusion of the Second Vatican Council, which is very commonly known as Vatican II. Between 1961 and 1965, all of the Catholic bishops from around the world met in Rome at the Vatican to address issues relevant to the Church's teaching and practice as regards both its internal life and its mission in the world. For most Catholics, the most significant and lasting impact of the Council was its provision for the celebration of Mass and other acts of worship in vernacular languages. For those who are not Catholic, one of the greatest accomplishments of the Council was to renew the Church's commitment to ecumenism, to fostering a greater unity among Christians in prayer, study, dialogue, and service to those in need. There are also two documents of Vatican II that are of tremendous significance to the work of this commission, and they are its Declaration on Religious Liberty and the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions. The Declaration on Religious Liberty affirmed as Catholic teaching the idea that the human person has a right to religious freedom. This freedom means that all people are to be immune from coercion in such wise that no one is to be forced to act in a manner contrary to their own beliefs, whether privately or publicly, whether alone or in association with others. The Council further declared that the right to religious freedom has its foundation in the very dignity of the human person, as this dignity is known through the revealed Word of God and by reason itself. In the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions, the bishops at Vatican II reminded all Christians that according to God's saving design, the beginnings of our faith and our election are found already among the patriarchs, Moses, and the prophets. And since the great spiritual patrimony common to Christians and Jews is so great, the Council wishes to foster and recommend mutual understanding and respect, which is the fruit above all of biblical and theological studies, as well as of fraternal dialogue. And most importantly, for our purposes today, the Church, mindful of the patrimony she shares with the Jews, decries hatred, persecutions, and all displays of anti-Semitism directed at Jews at any time by anyone. 35 years after the Second Vatican Council, this teaching on anti-Semitism prompted St. John Paul II in the Jubilee year 2000 to seek forgiveness on behalf of Christians of every time and place who might have ever in any way contributed to acts or a spirit of anti-Semitism. Speaking of the Jewish people, Pope John Paul II prayed to God, "We are deeply saddened by the behavior of those who in the course of history have caused these children of yours to suffer, and asking your forgiveness, we wish to commit ourselves to genuine brotherhood." In a recent collaboration with the American Jewish Committee, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, echoing the words of Pope Francis, stated clearly, "A true Christian cannot be anti-Semitic." Before I conclude these remarks, may I offer one brief personal example of how Catholics not only condemn anti-Semitism, but also reflect a willingness to engage in fraternal collaboration that flows from the common spiritual patrimony of Christians and Jews. From 2004 to 2008, I was the pastor of St. Thomas of Becket Catholic Church in Reston, Virginia. that church has the distinction of sharing what is one of the most prized portions of a faith community's patrimony, its parking lot, with a Jewish community. The Northern Virginia Hebrew Congregation was established in 1967 with congregants, but with no building of its own. The community eventually acquired a portion of the land owned by the Catholic Church in Reston and conducted its worship in the same space used by the Catholic parish until its synagogue was built on the property, where both communities have since shared not only the parking lot, but also semi-annual Catholic-Jewish dialogues on various theological, spiritual, and moral and ethical issues, while also collaborating to serve the material needs of those who are poor in the community. It's a small example, but it's an apt conclusion to this brief description of the Catholic Church's absolute condemnation of anti-Semitism and its commitment to respect and collaborate with the Jewish community to make a positive contribution to the common good in our religiously pluralistic American society. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. For those who don't follow the Babylon Bee, it is the master of satire of our generation, I believe. I'm a frequent reader. I'm glad I've never been a subject. But you have a lot to work with, to be honest. You've been the subject.
You probably have.
Seth?
Maybe after today, we'll see.
Yeah, maybe after today.
I will say, though, if you want me to be funny, you should bring me on a better topic, a lighter topic. This is a heavy one. First, I just want to start by saying I'm thankful to the commission. I'm thankful this commission exists, first of all. But I'm thankful to all of you for serving on it and for inviting me here to speak today. It's an honor to be here. I am Seth Dillon. I'm the CEO of the Babylon Bee, the world's most trusted, factually accurate news source. For those who aren't familiar, we publish funny fake news like The Onion or CNN. See, there you go. We got some laughs. We've actually gotten in trouble for CNN jokes before. The first joke we ever got fact-checked for on Facebook was a headline that read, CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news before publication. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, that was fact-checked and rated false, as if anybody believed that that was true. And Facebook threatened us with penalties and suspension if we continued to publish fake news. We're like, that's all we do is publish fake news. Oh man, there's so many other examples I'd give, but we can't get into all of that today. Our mission is not just to make you laugh, it's to make you think a little harder, or differently at least, about things that matter. The use of satire to expose foolishness and mock absurdity is ancient, tracing all the way back to the Hebrew prophets. To put it as succinctly as I can, our job is to ridicule bad ideas, not just because it's entertaining, but because it's necessary. Bad ideas taken seriously have catastrophic consequences. It should go without saying that anti-Semitism ranks highly among history's horrifying examples, but it's gaining popularity again today, particularly among younger generations on the right. And it's not always subtle. Transgressive agitators on social media are building massive cult-like followings, declaring themselves to be on Team Hitler. They proclaim without apology or fear of consequence that Hitler was right. The question is why, and what should or can be done about it. I'm a conservative, excuse me, and it's fair to say that a lot of the bad ideas we make fun of at the Babylon Bee are progressive ones. Recently, however, I've taken fire from fellow conservatives for pointing out what should be obvious. There are bad ideas on the right, too. Never punch right, they say. Focus on the real enemy, the left. They're the ones promoting abortion on demand, gender transition for minors, open borders, censorship, DEI, all of these things. And I've steadfastly opposed these ideas as a conservative. I've spent years and millions of dollars fighting them in both the courts and the culture. But what if those aren't the only bad ideas? If bad ideas spread like cancer, shouldn't we check for them everywhere? I recently visited an imaging center for a diagnostic CT scan, and I'm glad the technician wasn't only interested in scanning the left side of my body. What I've observed on the right is an equal but opposite reaction to the woke worldview that captured our culture and institutions. Instead of rejecting the woke framework, the radical right has embraced and emulated it. We're all familiar with how the woke left divides the world into oppressors and oppressed, the powerful and the marginalized. It's a grievance-based collectivist framework that says all of society's greatest problems are due to hidden power structures designed to prop up the patriarchy and maintain white supremacy. One has to wake up or become woke to see it. Critical race theory, DEI, and radical gender ideology were all aimed at equity rather than equality to correct the alleged power imbalance and topple that system. And many are now forcefully rejecting this warped worldview. But the radical right, or woke right as some have called it, has adopted this framework for itself. They've just swapped out the villain. Where the left sees hidden white supremacy, the so-called J-pilled right sees hidden Jewish power. The structure is identical, the same conspiratorial lens, the same collectivism, revisionism, and scapegoating, the same claim to special knowledge of realities the masses are too cowardly or complicit to accept. Waking up to these hidden realities means seeing Jews rather than white men as the oppressors who scheme and manipulate and subjugate. It means treating Jews as enemies. But why is this corrupt framework becoming popular with young people on the right in particular? And I think the short answer to that is that they were primed for it and then exploited. Young white men in particular have been told their whole lives that they are the problem. Masculinity is toxic, Western civilization is oppressive, whiteness carries guilt. That created hunger for any counter-narrative that said, you're not the villain. In fact, you're the victim, and someone more powerful than you is doing this to you. And there's some truth to that, of course. They were villainized. But that was the injustice of it. To turn around and do the same to someone else should be out of the question. At the same time, institutional trust was collapsing as so-called experts and authoritative voices were caught in one lie after another. Ironically, while they claimed to be fighting misinformation, it was beyond parody. But when you realize you've been lied to, you become dangerously vulnerable to a false inference that the opposite of whatever the history books or institutions say must be true, or that anyone who rejects those institutions and their lies must be offering the truth themselves. That's fertile ground for radical conspiracism. The anti-Semitic agitators exploited both vulnerabilities at the same time. They told young men who to blame, and they told a generation that had lost faith in every institution that here at last was the great hidden truth. Most people have a moral intuition that genocide, and I mean actual genocide, is evil. The Holocaust is one of the clearest cases of moral evil in modern memory. As long as we see that clearly, no one could possibly bring themselves to say Hitler was right. But that's why the revisionist project exists, to take the clarity away, to raise questions about what really happened and why, so that alternative answers seem not just plausible, but palatable. Historical revisionism, it turns out, is the sugar that makes poison taste good. When talking about solutions to this problem, I often hear calls for censorship. We need hate speech laws, I'm told, that would criminalize anti-Semitism. But that is not the answer. It's never the answer. In a free society, people have a right to be wrong. The First Amendment guarantees it. The answer isn't to suppress bad ideas, but to challenge them, to ridicule and refute them. Suppression only makes them more appealing to transgressive youth, and it validates their belief that power is being abused at their expense. But let me highlight what I think is a problem almost as great as the hatred itself, and that's the cowardice that allows the hatred to spread. There's been an effort to mainstream anti-Semitism. Radical voices are not just finding a platform, they're finding friendly platforms. This is disgraceful. And so is the silence of every prominent person who fails to call it out. Platforming is not the issue, promotion is, and we shouldn't be afraid to say it. I should note briefly that there are some theological issues at play here. I can't get into all of them, of course, but people are being drawn to a distorted version of the Christian faith, not because they found Christ, but because they found what they think is a religious sanction for their hatred of Jews. They cherry pick from Scripture to secure a theological license to hate. They declare, Christ is king, you dirty Jew, in the comments section. This should offend every Christian. It certainly offends Jesus, our Jewish Savior. The Apostle Paul, the Jew, said he would be cut off from Christ if it would save his people. That is the posture of Scripture. Anguish, irrevocable love, and the conviction that God's promises to the Jewish people have not been revoked. The posture of the radical right is its precise opposite. If your Christianity gives you permission to despise the people through whom God revealed himself to the world, who gave you the scriptures, the prophets, the moral law, and the Messiah, then you are not practicing Christianity, you're practicing a perversion of it. You are attacking the very root into which you've been grafted. There's a temptation to counter anti-Semitism by citing the contributions, the wonderful and remarkable and numerous contributions of the Jewish people to civilization, to law, to science, to philosophy, to the concept of human rights. These contributions are extraordinary, and the debt Western civilization owes to the Jewish moral and intellectual tradition is incalculable. But building the case on that foundation, I think, is a mistake, because it concedes the anti-Semites' premise that dignity is conditional, that it must be earned. Human beings are made in the image of God. That's where our dignity comes from. That is, in fact, the very foundation of religious liberty, the principle that every person, by virtue of bearing God's image, possesses inherent worth that no government, no mob, and no ideology can revoke. C.S. Lewis said that good philosophy must exist, if for no other reason than because bad philosophy needs to be answered. The antidote to anti-Semitism is not to ignore it or to outlaw it, but to confront it with courage and conviction. And that means not just calling out the anti-Semites, but the cowards who can't bring themselves to join us. Thank you.
Seth, I think you will have spoiled your image for your readers, that there's a brilliant mind behind all of that humor. Members, questions for and all these witnesses, all four of you, as the panels before us, have just been brilliant today and courageous today and honest today and in a variety of ways. It's really been a great three panels. Dr. Phil, did you have a light? Did I see a light or a no? Okay. Anything on this side? We're going to let you off scot-free. I can't believe that.
Oh, I do.
Oh, you do?
What was our
Tara,
joke
I'm sorry, I
about?
didn't
If
see your
nobody
light.
else wants to participate, I guess I will. Seth, I know you're big on free speech. Babylon Bee wouldn't exist if you didn't have freedom of speech, and I'm full supportive of that. You said platforms are an issue, which I assume you're referring to X. Are you saying that Elon and heads of platforms need to censor speech that they determine as anti-Semitic? And if so, by what definition do they censor? Would that definition censor this verse from the Bible? The Jews who killed both the Lord Jesus and their own prophets and drove us out and don't please God and are contrary to all men. 1 Thessalonians 2:14.
I think you may have
I think he should be removed. I think he should be removed.
Excuse me, we will not have outbursts from the audience. If there's a further outburst, I will ask you to leave.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, you're out. Please escort this
Thank you.
gentleman. We will not be interrupted.
Thank you. We're having a discussion. It's very important.
I think you may have misheard what I said about platforms. I said platforms are not the problem. Promotion is the problem. So what I advocate for, I actually personally advocated for Nick Fuentes to be reinstated on X when Elon took it over. Not because I like what he has to say, but because I love that he has the right to say it. So even these ideas that I steadfastly oppose, I think the solution to them is to push back on them. Better speech, more speech, good speech in response to bad speech. So you may have just misunderstood what I was saying there about the platforms.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you. And then, Leo, thank you so much for being here. What anti-Semitic actions have taken place? I've heard a lot of examples of harmful words and protests, but aren't we free in this nation to have the right to protest, protected by the First Amendment? As I said, Seth, love free speech, as do I. So words are protected. What I'm concerned about is what further legislation do we need around free speech?
Well, first of all, let me be very clear. I've been a civil rights attorney 35 years. I am a strong, strong believer in free speech. You will not have me challenge anyone's right to speak. I support Seth on that. But when you match speech with conduct, criminal conduct, such as blocking access to someone's right to go to school, along with the speech. Then you cross a line where there may be a criminal activity where the affirmative defense of free speech no longer exists. We had a lot of discussion about a school that I'm embarrassed that I went to, UCLA Law School. We heard what was going on. I was sitting there cringing because it was true. And we had people who were block access. Speech, I'm all good for that. Going back to what I originally said, all those charges in which the line was crossed, where it went from speech to conduct, believe it or not, the local prosecutor dismissed all those charges, the criminal charges. So that's why I'm saying this problem is really on a local level. But I will support anyone's right on speech. It's when they match it with conduct that might cross the line and would be considered criminal in and of itself.
But aren't there already laws to protect that?
Well, you never heard me say in my presentation, there are existing laws that should be utilized. I'm not talking about creating new laws.
So as the chairman of whatever your...
The task force.
The task force, yes, thank you. What do you recommend
Oh,
as
well,
far as further laws?
I mentioned it today. Well, first of all, Title VI is a funding law that should be used. Title VII is very critical. Civil Rights Act 1964-65, which allows employees who are facing discriminatory misconduct to seek action. Even union organizations can be used for Title VII. So those were the two that I was referring to. And what is a great weapon, which I have learned, is that Jewish faculty members in public unions are being denied right to participate. That's a Title VII action. So what I'm saying is, under the rubric of what is currently in existence, civil rights laws, I think rights of Jewish Americans can be defended, can be executed properly. And if I was making any recommendation, there should be litigation under those two sections, Title VI and Title VII.
Thank you. And then one last question for Seth. I know you were at the Hamptons with Charlie Kirk. I know he was labeled an anti-Semite at the very end. Would you like to condemn him being labeled an anti-Semite?
Charlie was not an anti-Semite. Charlie loved the Jewish people dearly. And so I think that's very silly. Charlie was invited and was open to having debates about anything, including whether or not we should be supporting Israel, for example, in the current war. He's open to having those conversations. And he was very strongly irritated by people making those accusations at him by simply saying that we should be willing to have these conversations, because he didn't view that as crossing the line into anti-Semitism. Neither do I, up to a point. There are people who try to conceal their anti-Semitism under the guise of merely criticizing Israel, and you can see they're not merely criticizing Israel. But Charlie wasn't an anti-Semite, not even close, the opposite.
Eric?
Thank you. I spoke to Charlie about this stuff, and he was trying to have a substantive conversation, and he was clearly not an anti-Semite, but he was an anti-Dentite. That's a Seinfeld joke. If you don't get that joke, look it up. My relationship with Charlie was based on our love of Seinfeld, so I just want to clarify that, first of all. Regarding what Dr. Spaulding was saying about ideology, it's interesting to me. I've always felt that all of our problems, it's ultimately about the culture. The law can only do so much. You can make laws and make laws. We heard earlier, you can have a law, and if the cops aren't doing something, who cares what the law is? So ultimately, we have to educate young people in particular, but older people as well. Our founding, I just finished writing a 600-page book on the American Revolution, and when I started writing it, I was 10 years old. No, when I started writing it, I honestly didn't understand how clearly Christian, and I would even go so far as to say Reformation, Puritan Christian, the founders were. Now, I say that just because it's dramatically true, and it is not taught in our schools. And we have been dealing with, the reason we're in this mess right now in the culture is because for decades, we've not been teaching civics and the basics of who we are as a people. You cannot get America, You cannot get a love of religious liberty and a love of liberty unless you understand where that comes from and what it means. And I would say, speaking as a Christian, I don't agree with certain theologies as a Christian, but as a Christian, I would die defending the right of people to have those theologies. And that is a Christian value. That's not an Islamic value. And we have to have that conversation in America about what does it mean to be an American? What are the limits of religious liberty, obviously, but we can't pretend we've fallen into relativism where we're no longer able to have intelligent conversations. You cannot sustain liberty or religious liberty unless you have an understanding of the founding and of the mind of the founders. And if you begin to pretend that, oh, it's about the Enlightenment, it's not Enlightenment rationalism, ladies and gentlemen. And, you know, people didn't come here from Europe so they could pursue Enlightenment rationalism. It came out of their Christian convictions. But I say this because ultimately what we're talking about here, it's a hatred of the West. It's a hatred of the God of the West. It's a hatred of the God of the Bible. That's at the heart of this. And so in this 250th year, which President Trump on the stage declared, it's officially the supercentennial, in case you didn't get that memo. The 250th, we don't have a term like bicentennial, so he's calling it the supercentennial. But the point is, this is the year that we in America have to talk publicly about what does it mean to be an American, who we are as an Americans. This isn't some Enlightenment, rationalist, neocon project. This is fundamentally a biblical project. It's an extension of the Sinai covenant. All of the founders understood this. And so as I hear us talking about this, you cannot sustain America and you cannot sustain a love of religious liberty and a respect for people with whom you disagree unless you understand this. And it comes out of the Bible, and we have to say that publicly. And I don't know how we say that in K through 12, but we did for 200 years say that in public schools in America. We taught it simply because it was our history. And something has happened. It kind of came into the culture in 1968. You know, we were talking earlier about, the lack of courage of academic leaders standing up to the Marxist lunacy that was breaking the campuses at that time. And I think that if we do not understand these things and teach these things, we can make all the laws we want, and we need to make laws. But the first thing that I would recommend the President of the United States to do is to absolutely defund practically every penny that taxpayers are giving to higher education, because higher education has become a breeding ground for every wicked ideology. And I was at Yale in the early 80s, and it was so strong in the early 80s when I was there. I was astonished. I'd never encountered it. And so I think we need to the extent that we have the power of the purse, to defund almost all higher education, because they are not even, it's not even close to what they're doing. The harm they're doing goes way beyond what we saw following October 7th. And so I just felt that I needed to say that it's about the culture, but I would love any of you to respond, but particularly Seth Dillon and Dr. Spalding, since you work in the cultural space.
We went from no lights to lots of lights. Did you want to make a comment, Dr. Spalding? Then we'll get to our...
I'm happy to just say at this point, that was part of the reason I mentioned America 250, because I do think it's an opportunity to educate at all levels. And we have to bring the positive over and over again. We have to bring the factual over and over again. And then I'd like to hear what some more people have to say before we might continue the conversation.
I'm not sure which order, but Reverend Franklin, did I see your light there for a minute?
Well, yeah, that comes on and off.
That's why I wanted to get to you. I don't want to miss what you have to say.
Just to be clear, the accusations that the Jews killed Jesus, they didn't kill him. He's alive. He's not dead. His tomb is empty. But I would like to, after 9/11, Mr. Chairman, there were the hijackers were mostly Saudis, and they flew their airplanes into the Pentagon and the World Trade Center, and in the name of Islam. So after 9/11, Saudi Arabia, to improve its image, started funding on university campuses centers for Islamic understanding or studies. And that funding has created an issue now for our country after 20-some years because those centers now have grown, and they get money from other Gulf states that pour huge amounts of money into our universities. And that has a very negative impact on our education, and it's anti-Semitic. And so I think maybe we need a task force to follow the money and what has that produced. But I would just dare to say that there needs to be a study as to who's been influencing our universities to turn our universities and our students to be anti-Semitic.
Every now and then I hear that inner voice, God told me to call on you. He just didn't need that to be said, so a great comment.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yes, go ahead, Seth.
This is one of the first things you said, the Jews didn't kill Jesus, he's alive. Agree with that, yes, he lives. There were Jewish leaders who were calling for Jesus' crucifixion. There were also Jewish followers of Jesus. His disciples were Jewish. The authors of the New Testament, with the exception maybe of Luke, Acts, were Jewish. So there's two sides of that. And what does it have to do with Jews today? What guilt do they share in that? So those are, I think, important points to make. One other quick comment, too, if I could, on the in your initial question to me, you mentioned the Hamptons retreat. I think it's important for me to say something about this because nobody would have even known about this. Was a private retreat. The only reason that anybody knows about it is because a very prominent and loud anti-Semite wanted to make a big deal out of it to try to suggest that Jews were at this retreat, Zionists, maybe she would use that terminology. Sometimes she switches back and forth. But Candace Owens was claiming that people there blackmailed Charlie to try to keep him in support of Israel, offered him a ton of money. My name was mentioned, Bill Ackman's name. People were dragged through the mud. I've received death threats, multiple death threats. One man out in Texas was arrested for threatening to kill me and my family as a result of these lies that were told about me. This is the price that you pay if you defend Israel, if you defend Jews. The people who hate them, the anti-Zionists, the anti-Semites, will do everything that they can to smear and destroy you and intimidate you and try to get you to shut up and go and become quiet. And I would encourage other people, even facing that cost, especially because there's that cost, we need to be courageous and speak out.
Had your light on for a bit?
Yep, I guess it went off. I'm very aware of Rabbi Soloveitchik's comments about not claiming to speak for an entire religion. So I'm going to ask Father to do so, because I'm not a theologian, but he is. And this follows really, I guess, providentially between what Pastor Graham and Seth have just said, because it's at the Second Vatican Council that the Council Fathers make that exact point that Pastor Graham and Seth just made. So I just want to read a portion of that. It says, this is from Nostra Aetate. True, the Jewish authorities and those who followed their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction then alive, nor against the Jews of today. Although the church is the new people of God, the Jews should not be presented as rejected or accursed by God, as if this followed from the Holy Scriptures. Besides, as the church has always held and holds now, Christ underwent his passion and death freely because of the sins of men and out of infinite love, in order that all may reach salvation. Amen. And then after Pope Benedict, retired, it's unusual for a pope to retire, but he wrote an academic article that was published in Nova et Vetera on some of these questions. And I just want to read one section of that. He says, from this overview, one can say that the new view of Judaism that developed after the council can be summarized in two statements. One, the theory of substitution, which has hitherto determined theological reflection on this question, should be rejected. This view holds that after the rejection of Jesus Christ, Israel ceased to be the bearer of the promises of God, so that it could now be called the people who were once your chosen people. 2, instead, it is more correct to speak of the never revoked covenant, a theme that was developed after the council in connection with Romans 9 through 11. Both of these theses, that Israel is not replaced by the church and that the covenant was never revoked, are basically correct, but in many ways imprecise and need to be given further critical consideration. And then the rest of his essay gives that greater precision and theological consideration. So I more or less, open question, help us better understand what is the Catholic teaching vis-a-vis the Jewish people. I know that's a big question and you probably only have 30 seconds, but I kind of wanted to help clarify things and I thought you could do it.
Thanks for that confidence. As he said, first of all, I don't speak for all Catholics. We have 2 bishops on this commission who have a greater teaching authority than I do. But I would say, to the first point that's brought up about the responsibility for the death of Jesus. Reverend Graham is absolutely right. He's not dead, he's alive, he is risen, and that's what we believe. But I also think that really the church's understanding is, as you've really quoted it from the Declaration on the Relation of the Church to Non-Christian Religions, who is responsible for the death of Jesus? We would say all of us. People who are sinners of every time and place. Jesus' death on the cross is not a crime that we seek to prosecute, to assign guilt to this person or that who put nails in his hands or his feet. We don't attribute his death either to the Jewish people or to Pontius Pilate. We see Jesus' death as a sacrificial death, a death that he made in atonement as an offering for the forgiveness of the sins of every person of every time and place. And that's how Catholics understand who is responsible for the death of Jesus on the cross. It's all of us. And I think, you're absolutely right that Pope Benedict really has followed on in his own writings, not only as a pope, but as a theologian, to assist Catholic Christians, all Christians, to understand our relationship as Christians to the Jewish people. Personally, I really like the expression when we speak of our common spiritual patrimony. We come from the same Father in faith. And that actually is a title that Catholics use in our own Eucharistic prayer. We speak of Abraham, our father in faith. And so we really are one in a spiritual family, Christians and Jewish people. And that's how we see ourselves, I believe, as Catholics today, really seeing us sharing a great spiritual patrimony. And if there's one thing I think that's a really sign of hope or encouragement for me as a pastor on the very grassroots level, it's what we see in Catholicism today, a greater interest than ever before in learning the scriptures, understanding the Bible. I see it especially among college students. In our church today, there's a tremendously flourishing ministry called Focus, the Fellowship of Catholic University Students. Catholic students on university campuses really led primarily in the study of the Bible by young adults who are just out of college themselves. And if you are seeking to know God through understanding scriptures of the Old Testament and the New Testament, I think you will come to the conclusion that Pope Francis speaks of very clearly, as I mentioned before, that you cannot be a Christian and be anti-Semitic, because we do have the same Father in faith. Our understanding of who Jesus is formed by the scriptures of the Torah, the prophets, the wisdom literature, the Psalms especially. So I see that in a very positive way as a source of hope and encouragement as Catholics take seriously our responsibility to know God through knowing his word. The more we know the word of God, the more we'll know our common patrimony in a spiritual way as members of the same family, Christians and Jews together, created and saved by the same God.
Members, we're gonna have some very quotable comments from this the morning so far. We have one more panel after this, not on anti-Semitism, on debanking people of faith. So that'll a little change in direction. But you said something, and Kelly said it, that may be the quote of the day when you said we're all responsible. You know, and just for me personally, I used to thank God for dying on the cross for me, but I have just, as you said that, I always now pray, Lord, I'm sorry you had to die for me. Sometimes I don't feel worth it. I'm sorry you had to die for me. And so how you said that and laid that out was powerful. So thank you for saying it, and thank you for asking the question, Ryan. Rabbi, any other questions? Carrie, Rabbi, do you want to finish, or do you want to close, or do you want to ready to speak now?
I can speak after.
Go ahead. You've been on hold and we'll come to you, Carrie.
I was going to say this during my my later remarks. So if you'd like me to save that, Chairman, I'm happy to. But I did have one question.
Why don't you say it now, because the next panel is a different direction.
Meaning, do you want me to give my remarks now, or
how long are those?
Well, I was asked to give 10-minute remarks.
Okay. We'll save that for the end, because I don't want to
save
wait
it for the
the
end.
panel.
And that will be a rabbinic speech in 10 minutes. Will be a miracle, I assure you.
Yes. Okay.
So
we
I
do
did have
control
one
your
question,
microphone.
Yeah. I did have one question. The first, I wanted to express gratitude to the witnesses, all of you. I hope it's okay if I single out two. First, to Leo Terrell, I just want to express, just based on my own personal experience, I think you know how much gratitude to you and love for you there is among so many in the Jewish community. So I want to thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Never in my life, I'm just being honest, have I received so much love from the Jewish community here.
It's genuine.
I know, it's real, and it's this unity, it's religious, it's historical. And then I went to Israel, and the love there was off the charts. It was even greater, and it was that bond. I asked my chief of staff, who's out there, Sarah Goldman. I said, it's unbelievable. I never experienced this. So for you to say that, I'm blessed, I'm humble, I'm honored, and I'm committed to the fight.
Thank you. It's we who are grateful. Thank you. And to Seth Dillon, I want to thank you first for bringing me joy every day through your work. And second, for being a courageous and fearless speaker of truth. It is strange times when some of the best truth tellers are those that run a parody news website. But that is where we are. Again, I'm profoundly grateful. And my question is for you. You referred to not only the pernicious actors that we see now in certain spheres that are on the right or right adjacent, but you also spoke about the fear that others have to call them out. Mm-hmm. Can you explain that phenomenon? Is it genuine fear of genuine danger, as you described, what happened to your family after the ravings of Candace Owens? Is it a fear of losing online influence, a quest for clicks? You work in the online world, I think I can safely say. So please describe, how do you understand that fear?
It's a whole host of things. There are some excuses that are given for why certain people don't speak out. They'll say, for example, oh, well, I have a personal relationship with this person. You know, I'm friendship, loyalty matters to me. I'm not going to call them out. And, you know, that doesn't sit very well with me just because it's not a private interpersonal matter. Usually in these cases, these are like two public figures who are friends, and one of them is saying horrible things that have a negative impact on real people in our culture and our society. And so there's a duty, I think, that we have to address those things, even if it comes from a friend. I think our loyalty needs to be to the truth, first and foremost, above everything else. Mm-hmm. And that you're not being a good friend if you're not willing to confront them when they're going off the rails and do some dark stuff. So friendship, I think, requires that honesty, too. But yes, there's a real fear. I think they tried to make an example out of me by showing, you know, they spoke about, I had, you know, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, go on for 10 minutes about what a traitor I am, you know, what a terrible person I am. You get that kind of, those personal attacks, and those are really meant to bully and intimidate other people. Like, look what we did to Seth. You know, you don't want to go through that. These people have way more reach and influence than I do. And so that can be very intimidating. So I think it's one of the reasons. But yeah, then there's also the audience capture thing that's going on. People are trying to test where the wind is blowing and see what position they should be taking on these issues. They're afraid to come out with a certain position that might alienate some people from their audience, and so they try to stay on the sidelines and ride it out. There's just a host of things at play. But I think when we have the clarity to know really what's right and wrong, and that evil is being done and said, we have a moral duty to speak out, even if that means that there's going to be some kind of a cost. And whatever we're afraid of, we have to overcome that and be courageous. And that courage will inspire other people. That's the thing about this kind of fear, is it goes away once you see other people standing up and speaking. It's its strongest when we're all zipping our mouths shut. So you can take that away by standing up and speaking. You can spread courage like a good infection.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carrie?
Thank you. Dr. Scott Hahn, one of the most respected Catholic theologians, he's written over 50 books. He's a biblical scholar, professor of church history. He said this: "Stop carelessly labeling people anti-Semites. Catholic Christianity does not in any way require you to embrace Zionism as a fulfilled prophecy." So what I've heard today is that if you don't support Zionism, you are an anti-Semite. Is that your testimony today? Seth? Yeah.
This thing on? I thought you were asking him.
No, I'd like to ask you.
Now I'm on the hot seat.
Yeah.
I don't think that someone failing to support, I guess it depends on what you mean by Zionism. There's been a conversation about that today. If Zionism is simply taken to mean the Jewish people's right to exist in their homeland, if you're actively promoting or seeking their eradication, then yes, I think that would definitely be anti-Semitic.
Yeah,
if
so
you're
if it's
simply
not
not
that,
adopt,
if it-
but
yeah.
if you're thinking of the definition more of like, well, the Bible says that we have
theological.
to have this faithful commitment to the Jews in the,
Right, theological supremacy.
Yeah, you don't have to have that view. No,
Thank
there can be
you.
a range of views on
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't be
absolutely.
anti-Semitic, just like Dr. Scott Hahn said.
No, it can be a cover for anti-Semitism, but it isn't, I don't think, inherently anti-Semitic. No, of course not.
Thank you for that. And then one last thing, two things for you. One, what was the purpose of the Hamptons meeting that you had?
Yeah.
And then two, I would really appreciate it if you would stop calling Candace Owens an anti-Semite. She's not an anti-Semite. She just doesn't support Zionism, and that really has to stop.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why you keep bringing her up and Tucker.
Well, because they're the two most famous anti-Semites.
There you
right
go
now.
again.
Yeah.
Everyone's an anti-Semite. Everyone's an anti-Semite, I guess. So if you don't support Zionism, you just said you're not an anti-Semite, yet Candace is an anti-Semite.
I think she goes far beyond not merely supporting Zionism. She calls Jews the synagogue of Satan. She denigrates anyone who, she often uses the word Zionist and the word Jew interchangeably. At one point, she slipped up and used the word Jew, and someone said, "Oh, you're not saying Zionist anymore?" She's like, "No, gloves are off."
So do you think saying Christ is king is anti-Semitic?
No, Christ is king.
Amen.
Christ is my king. He's the
Okay.
king of the universe.
So that's what started
but-
the whole thing with her, right?
But, my thing with her. Christ, what I explained to her, and this is what she considered this deep betrayal, was simply that the phrase Christ is king has been, admittedly by many, co-opted for the purpose of identifying with a Groyper movement and putting the Jews in their proper place to show them that they are other than. And they will use the phrase in very, very nasty contexts, like I cited in my statement earlier, "Christ is king, you dirty Jew." I've had that told to me dozens of times. Do you think that that's anti-Semitic?
Of course.
Okay, so the phrase...
No, not the Christ is king part, but the you dirty Jew. Of
Right.
course.
So
I say Christ is king all the time. I'm not an anti-Semite.
Right, and I don't think that makes you an anti-Semite.
Thank you.
I'm talking about how the phrase can be abused. So there's plenty of ways to use that phrase in a certain context or paired with other sentiments that make it clear that that person doesn't actually believe Christ is king. You can't say Christ is king, you dirty Jew, and call yourself a Christian. Christians worship a Jew. It's just absurd. So, but no, the phrase itself, and this is what I actually said in my comments, the phrase is not anti-Semitic. I declare it with humility and reverence myself. It's the abuse of the phrase. Just like when someone takes the Lord's name in vain, you should find that objectionable as a Christian. I hope that you do. Someone saying something like that in that context to a Jewish person for the purpose of treating them as other than or excluded or, to disparage them in some way, that is using the Lord's name in an abusive manner. It's exploiting it for political reasons or just for the sake of promoting hatred. And I find that repulsive.
So anti-Semitism to you is mostly speech, correct?
I didn't say that, no. I don't know where you got that.
But for someone to say Christ is king on their social media platform, would you label that an anti-Semitic if you're looking into the context of what they're saying, or if they just say it, Christ is king? Like,
it could be.
why
You
are we
have
analyzing
to
that?
look at the context. Yeah.
But I would say that's anti-Christian if you're analyzing why I'm saying Christ is king.
No, saying the phrase Jesus Christ is not taking the Lord's name in vain unless you're doing it in a certain context, right? There's context matters.
Yeah, so going back to Candace Owens, when she worked for Daily Wire, your friend Ben fired her because she said Christ is king.
And I never said that what she said was anti-Semitic.
Okay, but you're calling her an anti-Semite.
Oh, yes, because she said way worse than that.
Okay, let's move on because everyone seems to be obsessed with Candace. My last question, why were you at the Hamptons?
Can just real quick.
Why were you at the Hamptons?
Do you think that anything Candace has said is anti-Semitic?
No, I don't.
Nothing, ever. That's interesting.
I mean, I listen to her daily.
You should look up more of
I haven't
her
heard one
statements.
thing out of her mouth that I would say is anti-Semitic.
Okay. If I may, could I answer the Hamptons question?
You may answer.
I'll do it briefly.
You may answer, and I encourage you to answer, but this is not an interrogation, so you don't have to answer.
Of course, yeah. I'm having fun.
I'm not interrogating him. He's a comedian. He can handle it.
Yeah, no, this is the best part of my day. The Hamptons meeting was a retreat called by Charlie. It was. I don't know if many of you are familiar with this. I'll give you a little context, but there was a claim that was made that an intervention was staged with Charlie, where people pulled him into a room in a very aggressive manner, pressured and blackmailed him because they felt like he was straying away from his support for Israel. That was the claim. The Hamptons retreat, and that was. The Hamptons retreat was characterized that way. It was not like that. There were about 30 people there, handpicked and invited by Charlie personally. He brought us there. He stood at the front of the room with a microphone throughout the thing. The theme of it was Save the West. His primary focus was on the threat of Islam, the problem of Islam. There was heated and spirited debate about the issue of Israel in the room, but it was debate that Charlie himself initiated, and he wanted to hear different perspectives on it. And so we voiced a lot of our perspectives. One of the things that I disagreed with him on was he said that, if you're not sufficiently supportive of Israel, it can be really ruinous for you in a position like his.
Yeah.
If you criticize Israel at all, they'll try to denigrate you and destroy you and call you names, call you anti-Semitic, etc. And it can ruin you. And I said, yes, certainly that's true, but it can also be very costly to stand up to those people. And I gave the example of my own experience where I criticized the critics of Israel, and they tried to destroy me. And so, we can all, whine and cry about the consequences of what might happen if we say certain things, but everybody has a right to give their opinion and say what they think. So there was back and forth like that. But there were many people that came out and made statements afterwards that it was completely mischaracterized. And that was really evil what she did, to lie about a situation like that and try to portray it as though the Jews were trying to blackmail Charlie. That resulted in death threats.
She never said that.
She absolutely said that.
No, she didn't.
She put my face on a movie poster for I Know What You Did Last Summer, suggesting that I had a role in his murder. Like I played a role in his murder. That's why someone tried to kill me and my family and got arrested in Texas.
Well, yeah,
what do you mean?
she has death threats too.
This is all imaginary to you. It's all very real to me. I experienced it.
Yeah,
you can't tell me that it
death
didn't
threats
happen.
too. I experienced them too.
Well, thank you for your question.
We all do. Yeah.
Yeah, but Charlie paid the price. It was more of a threat.
Yeah.
Any other, I think Allison, do you have your light on? I'm sorry. It's hard for me to see you down there.
Just real briefly, Seth, you're right. What we are about is deadly serious in terms of protecting religious liberty. It is not just it is existential to America, and because it is existential to America, it is existential to the world, because we are the light. And I just want to thank you. You may not have any idea just how much joy you bring to a lot of us out in the fields, getting hammered, getting criticized, especially when you poke fun at us. Because it's sort of, as a person of faith, you kind of feel like you're the only person that it's fair game, right, for people to pick on and criticize. And so to be able to read the Bee and see just a spot on a joke about, you know, getting the family in the van to get to church on time, right? It's just, I just really wanted you to know. You are playing a really important role. Number one, in the war of ideas, but also in encouraging and bringing joy to the fighters. And so I just really wanted to take this opportunity to thank you.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to say it's not all me. I can't take full credit for what we do. I have an amazing team of people who are very talented that keep you laughing every day. So I mostly just stand behind them, urging them to be funnier. And they do a pretty good job at that. So, but I appreciate it, and I'll pass that feedback on to them because they'll be encouraged by that too. We love bringing levity into the world and getting people to laugh, while also, you know, dealing with some of these serious issues.
Paula?
Yes, first off, I want to thank you all so much. Leo, working with you on a daily basis and what we do at the White House Faith Office. I was going to hold all my comments and everything till the end, and hearing everyone and thanking them for their witness, their testimony, their courage, everything else. Allison, I have to echo what you were going to say, because that's what I was going to say. Every single day, I face stories of people for their faith being extremely persecuted here in America in atrocious ways, sitting with students from Northwestern or UCLA or Harvard. Which one of us would allow a 64-year-old to be put in a chokehold and just sit there and watch him die? Who would do that? Who would allow these people to go in and terrorize church services, worship services, where people don't feel safe? The work that we do on the Religious Commission is vitally important for all people of all faiths. And keeping it in that context is a responsibility for us to make sure that we protect people for religious liberty. I know that there are people in the audience on this panel. We've given up our life to make sure that people are protected. The president, and I just want to simply say thank you all for being such champions. Leo, you're right, it has to go to a local level. It has to go through our school. We have to enforce every single law that we have, and we must stay focused on the reality that people are being beaten, brutalized. It's not just free speech. Ostracized, threatened. And it is our great honor to be picked for this commission to make a difference and make sure in America that our founders, who made it our inalienable right in the Constitution, that every single person has the right to approach God, to worship Him freely. And I thank you, Dan and Ben, as our co-chairs, to make sure that we make that happen.
Thank you. Paula, Ryan, you want to follow up?
Yes, just very briefly, there was something very important that went on between Carrie and Seth's exchange that needs to be highlighted. When she quoted Scott Hahn, he said that no Catholic is required to believe in Zionism as a, quote, fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And Seth agreed with that. And so as a Religious Liberty Commission, we don't think anyone needs to think that modern day Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That is vastly different than saying that the modern nation state of Israel does not have a right to exist. And I think we need to highlight that distinction.
Dr. Ben, did you? I know you're.
It's not acting right.
You have to understand, I seldom look left in my life. I'm always looking right.
Well, I want to thank you for, and several of the panelists today have mentioned that it's not just a plot against Jews, but against all of us. It's a bigger plot than that. And I'm just wondering, when you look at our society today, and you see people trying to drive wedges between us on the basis of race, religion, gender, wealth, you name it, they're trying to drive wedges. Is this part of a bigger plot to divide and conquer? Jesus said it himself, a house divided against itself cannot stand, repeated by Abraham Lincoln. Is that what's going on?
You're all free to.
I think two things I would say, and it's going back to our common biblical heritage. You know, one of the things we need to address as a country more seriously is just the reality of evil and sin. Division is a fruit of the original sin, and it's right there in the first chapters of the book of Genesis. You know, we are seeing more and more, it seems to me, on different levels of government, a disunity between the laws of our land and God's law. And as that gap gets ever wider, there's going to be a greater disunity. There's a growth or an allowance for more mischief by the spirit of evil, the evil one, the devil himself. And I think that's one thing as a country we need to do. You know, part of the work of this commission is not just to identify evils, but also, I think, to identify where we as religious people of all different faiths can make a contribution. And especially Christians and Jews, we have a lot to say where we have common ground in terms of what God's law requires of us when we talk about human dignity, respect for human life, and how we ought to treat people with equality. And when we can go back to that origin, that's one of the first things I think, you know, where we're going to see not only the identification of evil, but the positive good that we all can bring to our society. And the second thing I think we also need to remember is that this conflict between people of faith, again, in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, we see brother killing brother. You know, right after the sin of Adam and Eve, we see the fratricide. And that's what we're doing to one another in this day in different ways, but we're killing ourselves. The more we allow these divisions to enter into our society, whether they be based on religion or race or any other distinction, our blindness to our common humanity, that's a part of our spiritual patrimony as Christians and Jews. To go back to the first chapter of the book of Genesis and the second, you know, that everything that God created is good, and that he created all of us in his image and likeness with that fundamental, inalienable human dignity. If we don't get back to that, we're just going to keep going down the path that we are going, which is greater disunity rather than unity. And we have a great opportunity, I think, to reclaim that unity, that spirit, in this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. You know, this country is founded, its first document in 1776 speaks of a shared belief in a common creator. That's what we have that in common. Why are we not emphasizing that? Christians, Jews, other people of faith have a shared belief in a common creator who's created every single person with dignity, with inalienable rights. And among these included our life, the right to life. We need to go back to that fundamental principle that every single human life is a gift from God because we're all created in God's image and likeness. Life, liberty, that's what we're all about in the work of this commission. Our first liberty being our religious liberty. So all I'm saying is nothing that's rocket science or profound theology. I'm just saying let's go back and reread the first couple of chapters of the Bible, 1, 2, 3, and let's read the Declaration of Independence. And when we reclaim those values, we'll be on a much better path to achieving the common good, a good society in our country.
And I don't want to be the downer after that. I agree with everything that Father just said, but I want to answer your question. So take everything that Father Tom just said, add in what all of you have just said on the commission, and then remember, of course, God is omni-everything, so he knew that ideology would happen. It's not as if he couldn't foresee that too. But you have to understand that that makes the evil even worse, if it's possible. And I go back to Alexander Solzhenitsyn's famous characterization of ideology, where he said it makes Iago look like he was a little lamb, and that you have something that is so total about how it wants to break down everything that you just testified to, that is based in that beautiful harmony of faith and reason that we're built on in the United States. And so we have to be aware of that. And that's part of the reason I was tasked to talk specifically about ideologies. And they are a problem at all levels in our schools, in our curriculum. And it means it's on us. We have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our kids. We have to educate everybody in our communities about this. And then fight, fight, fight. And then that will, we'll get to this. I mean, it's all true. But if we just think it's like the old days, then we're not going to move forward. In fact, we're going to lose. We're going to lose. So now you have to say something really upbeat again, Father.
Doctor, everybody good? We were together in Amarillo Saturday night. By coincidence, both speaking. I had the privilege to introduce you as the keynote speaker. By the way, Sam Houston also said it, a house divided against itself cannot stand. I just want to get a plug in for Sam Houston in Texas. This, again, has been a great discussion. We started on anti-Semitism, but we broadened the discussion, which I think has been very healthy. And I think we have gone, since you asked the question, I think we've gone beyond politics. I think the battle for America is darkness and light. And those of us who believe in the light have to understand that there are those who want to take over our country. In every totalitarian government in the history of the world, the first thing you have to do is remove God. And the seeds of chaos in our, to separate the family, to separate us as people, where we can't even have Thanksgiving together with someone who supports another candidate. They are working hard every day. And to take over a country, you get rid of God, you take over the education, you take over the messenger. Do we have any question about the messages we see every day? And so it's darkness and light that we're battling. It's not even Republican and Democrat or some independent party. It's darkness and light. And we, as Seth said, if we're not willing to stand up for the light and call out the darkness, and you said, Dr. Spalding, then we lose. And Seth, everybody's been threatened. People around here more than myself. But the fact that you put yourself really out there every day, you sacrifice everything you have, as well as your life being on the line. We all do that from time to time, but you do it every day. So I have such great respect. I've never met you before. I just thought you were a wisecracking guy behind the Babylon Bee. But your testimony has been excellent in the answers to your questions. I want to dismiss this panel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
trip on any of their cables.
Don't trip. Be careful. Be careful.
First, we'd asked Rabbi Soloveitchik if he wanted to conclude on this, and we won't be taking questions or comments on what he says. It's just a conclusion here at the end of this panel as we transition to the debanking issue, and that will be our last panel. And we may be a little past 1:30, but we'll be close depending on how many questions we have for the final panel. Rabbi?
Thank you, Chairman Patrick. And before I begin, I just want to note that I know personally how seriously you take the subject we met to discuss today, and I just want to say how much that means to me, and thank you for your leadership. I've been asked by the Commission to speak briefly about how the early history of the Jews in America relates to our own moment. It's a topic near and dear to my heart, a subject of my writings on which I draw today, and personal to me because my own synagogue is the oldest Jewish congregation in the United States. We don't like to talk about that except pretty much every day. Its members served in the Revolution and experienced the warm embrace of the founders. But in speaking about the topic of Jews in America and early America, I want to begin by quoting a non-American, which is the late British Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who described how as a young man he first visited Washington, D.C., and he was struck by the memorials, Lincoln Memorial, Jefferson Memorial, which as he saw, contain not only images of these men, but also etched in stone their words, the ideas with which they left us. Declaration, Gettysburg Address. And Rabbi Sachs reflected that if you go to London, you don't see anything like this. They have a lot of memorials, but no words. The memorial for David Lloyd George has 3 words on it: David, Lloyd, and George. The statue of Churchill has only 1 word: Churchill. Now, words were kind of important for Churchill. So why the difference? The reason, Rabbi Sachs said, and I'm paraphrasing him, is that England was, until recently, a class-based society. Those who belong know, those who need to ask show thereby that they don't belong. American society is different, Rabbi Sachs reflected, because from the Pilgrim Fathers onwards, it was based on the concept of covenant, as set out in the Hebrew Bible, especially in Exodus and Deuteronomy. So Rabbi Sachs said, and the point is that covenant is a political compact, in Hebrew brit, that is about more than self-interest. It's done in dedication to a creed, binding parties thereby in responsibility to one another, but in the presence of God. America came to understand itself as a covenantal people, bound to a creed, united by God amidst their differences. Thus, in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. It's only with the covenantal nature of America in mind that we can appreciate simultaneously the unique role that faith played and plays in our country, and the unique way in which Jews were welcomed in the United States. Thus, on July 4th, 1788, a parade was held in Philadelphia to celebrate the state's ratification of the Constitution. One witness, the physician and signer of the Declaration, the devout Christian Benjamin Rush, described the prominent place that Christian clergy played in the procession, and their presence, as he wrote, manifested by their attendance their sense of the connection between religion and good government. But he also added that pains were taken to connect ministers of the most dissimilar religious principles together. In other words, to highlight unity amidst religious difference. And then Rush tells us that one of the clergy in the parade wasn't Christian. These are his words. The rabbi of the Jews, locked in the arms of 2 ministers of the gospel, was a most delightful sight. There could not have been a more happy emblem contrived of that section of the new Constitution, which opens all its power and offices alike, not only to every sect of Christian, but to worthy men of every religion. End quote. Thus, the new constitutional order did not demand a public square scrubbed of faith. The clergy marched arm in arm, rabbi and minister, in a parade unimaginable anywhere else on earth in 1788 or in 1888. Faith and freedom were civically celebrated together, each reinforcing each other, or if you will, a rabbi and a minister march in a parade is not the opening of a joke. It's not what it is. It is instead a description of an event that marked the advent of a wholly new approach to the role of religion in society, a covenantal people of religious difference, but united all the same in dedication to the American creed. Soon after this parade, Washington was inaugurated in 1789. Leaders from various minority faith communities in America each sent a letter of congratulations to the president. Catholics came together, all sent him one letter. Baptists came together and sent Washington one letter. Quakers came together and sent Washington one letter. The Jews in America could not really agree who would send the letter, so they ended up sending him 3 letters. There's maybe 1,000 Jews in America, 3 letters. And thank God, because Washington wrote a response to each one. He was a gentleman. And they're splendid. And I'll just briefly cite 2 of the 3. The first was to the Jews of Savannah, which concluded with a biblical allusion. Washington wrote, "May the same wonder-working deity who long since delivering the Hebrews from their Egyptian oppressors planted them in the promised land, whose providential agency has lately been conspicuous in establishing these United States as an independent nation, still continue to water them with the dews of heaven, and to make the inhabitants of every denomination participate in the temporal and spiritual blessings of that people whose God is," and then Washington concluded with God's Hebrew name, which traditional Jews don't pronounce. So what Washington tells the Jews is that he sees the tale of the Exodus and of America as parallel to each other. And he's expressing that the Jews were to be welcomed in America, yes, because of the ideals of equality, but Washington is also making sure to emphasize the way in which the Jewish scriptural story inspired the exceptional covenantal nature of America itself. 2 months later, Washington visited Newport, Rhode Island, and drawing on the letter he received from Newport Jewry, he responded with what has now become a famous passage. Washington wrote, "It is no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. So if Jews in America never experienced the horrors that Jews encountered on the European continent, it was in part because this country's founders embraced its Jews from the beginning and decried Jew hatred as un-American. Then, in this letter, Washington again concluded with a biblical allusion, his favorite Bible verse from the book of Micah. He wrote, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." Needless to say, nothing like this had been written in Europe by head of state. A friend of mine, Chris Scalia, son of the late Justice Scalia, told me that his father loved this letter, not because he was Jewish, because of course he wasn't, but because it reflected for the late Justice something larger about America. In fact, Justice Scalia quoted it a month after he became the first American of Italian descent to be elevated to the Supreme Court, and he quoted it in a speech to Italian Americans, not to Jews. And he was seeking to express to them how being American means embracing what America stands for. And you can come here from anywhere on earth and embrace what America stands for. Whether you come from Jewish communities around the world to America, or you came from Italy. And then Washington, in other words, America is a covenantal nation. And then Scalia said, if you do not believe that, you need look no further than the actions of the greatest American of them all, the father of our country, George Washington. During his first term in office as president, Washington wrote a letter that is a model of Americanism addressed to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island. This blue-blooded aristocratic Virginian assured that small community that his administration, his country, would brook no discrimination against that small and politically impotent community, and that the children of Abraham, as he put it, were welcome in this country to live in peace and never to have fear. So Scalia said. But the hard truth is that this has not been a couple of years in which the children of Abraham in America have lived in peace without fear. And the story I tell, the point Scalia made about the way in which the Jews found a home in America, actually illustrates the unique nature of America for all of us. And this is important because the hatred that we are seeing is not really only about the Jews. The mobs on college quads blocking Jewish access to classes, they're not patriotically holding up American flags as they do so. They hate America and the West in general. Further, the frenzied conspiratorial comments about Jews that we now find on parts of the right, to which Seth Dillon referred, also go hand in hand with utterly unfounded revisionism about American history, just as we've been seeing that already in a different form on the woke left. Thus, we hear from the woke left that the revolution, that the American founding was itself evil. And we hear from other circles, a few on the right, saying that the American campaign in World War II was immoral. Each is an attempt to take moments that America expanded liberty for the world and to denigrate it. The Jewish story in America is linked to the exceptional nature of America, and that's precisely why it is hated. What this means, then, is that Jew hatred is not only about the Jews, it concerns all those who care about the uniqueness of this nation. David McCullough, in his biography of Harry Truman, describes how Harry Truman was presiding over the Senate and then went to, I think, his card game, and he was suddenly summoned to the White House, and he sees Eleanor Roosevelt sitting there, and Eleanor Roosevelt says to him, "Harry, the president is dead." And he didn't really realize in the moment, I think, what it meant for him. So he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And she said, "Is there anything we could do for you? Because you are the one who's in trouble now." The past couple of years, I've heard from religious leaders, from political leaders, people that have reached out to me from various faith communities in America. And what they have said is there anything we can do for you? It is so, so appreciated. As I expressed to Leo Terrell, it is so appreciated. But what I also want to say is that we, all of us, all Americans, are the ones who are in trouble if this is allowed to fester, because at its core is a hatred of America and American exceptionalism, which is why it's so meaningful that we meet today to seek to preserve the exceptional nature of America, an exceptional nature which was heralded in a parade over 2 centuries ago a parade featuring ministers of the gospel and a rabbi walking arm in arm, celebrating the precious meaning of the newborn United States, a wonder that we shall celebrate on its 250th birthday this year, and whose exceptional covenant will please God be defended, protected, and preserved for many years to come. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rabbi. Our last panel on debanking. Ambassador Sam Brownback, Lacey Smith, and Hermione Susanna. I believe it's Hermione Susanna. I did the best I could. Hermione? Is that the way I say it? Hermione. Like Hermione Gingle, who used to be in, yes. Yes, I don't know what she did, but I know once upon a time she was on TCM in some movie, and there we go. Ambassador, great to have you. Thank you. We talked when we were forming this commission. Do you remember?
I do remember that.
That was almost a year ago. I reached out to you because you'd been involved in a similar exercise and wanted your guidance. You're our lead witness.
Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to join you. And I want to thank everybody that's serving on this panel. This is, I just think, critically important because what you're seeing take place is really this effort to suffocate people of faith in the public square. And we'll talk specifically about debanking here, but I think just as a context to set it, it's really an effort to try to take people generally associated with traditional values and just make it hard for them to operate in the body politic America. You've got a great lawyer here. We're winning all these law cases when they go up to the Supreme Court and keep running them. We need more of them to get up there. But you got to bring it back down into the culture, and you got to get it into the legislative process. In my estimation, for these to be a reality for the everyday person to happen. I remember at one point in time having a conversation with one of the Supreme Court justices, and I was just talking with him, and I was interested in religious freedom, and I asked him, I said, are we going to have religious freedom in America? And he said, yes, you will in the law. I'm not sure you'll have it in the culture. And I thought, I think that's accurate. And so what this effort is, I think, really is to try to get it broader to the culture, to the people, and I think that's critically important. Our case is a really pretty straightforward one. I'd worked on international religious freedom cases for a long time, both in the Senate and as ambassador for international religious freedom. And then I started seeing more and more. We were seeing the same sort of things happening internationally creeping into here with these really attacks on people of faith. You weren't being thrown in jail as much. You weren't being communal violence, but you were being suffocated. You were being debanked, deplatformed, de-insurance. These sort of things is what was regularly happening. So we formed the National Committee for Religious Freedom, bipartisan, multi-faith, nonprofit to advocate for religious freedom for all Americans all the time. Pretty simple, right? We opened our business, opened the checking account, and here was my first big mistake. We did it on April 15th, 2022. Just should never do anything on April 15th. Then I go in to put some funds in the account because I'm starting it, and I'm putting in some funds to get this started on May 19th in a local branch in Kansas. We opened it here in D.C. We wanted a national bank to be able to work with. And I go to the counter there in suburban Kansas City, and the lady looks at this computer screen, and she says, I'm sorry, that account has been closed. The note here on the screen says it's been done at the corporate office. It was explained the decision was final and non-revocable, and they weren't supposed to say anything more to me. That was in Kansas that I get to, what did we do? What happened here? So this is 34 days after we had opened the account here in Washington, D.C. Well, and as God would have it, our executive director had previously worked for Chase Bank. Before he came to us, and so he knew kind of how to get into the system and ask what's going on here. So we made a bunch of requests. They weren't answering it. And then finally, on June 8th, we got a hold of somebody there. They said, well, okay, we will reconsider, provided you disclose all your donors, provide a list of intended fund recipients, and full details of how the NCRF will select pro-religious freedom candidates to support. And, I haven't practiced law in a long time, but I'm going, you can't do this, ask those sorts of things of us, of which she later said that was patently false, but we had transcribed, we had recorded the conversation, so we have a transcript of this conversation we can provide to you. I then was reached out to by a former staff member of mine that was now working for Chase Bank here. I'd been in the Senate, and this staff member had transitioned. I presume he's doing very well financially, and he's now working for Chase Bank. And he said, hey, it was just bad customer service, kind of everything's going to be all right. And I'm going, well, it's not all right. But he did put us in touch with somebody on up the stream. And then they started saying, well, we were concerned that something you said when you opened the account triggered us thinking that there might be some money laundering or domestic terrorism issues involved here. And I'm going, I've had top secret clearance for 20 years. I don't think that's probably the right answer that's true. And then they said, well, you didn't fill our forms out. And I said, well, you're supposed to give us a standard of 60 days to provide all the information you want, and you gave us 34. Multiple occasions, we asked, as being a responsible person at Chase, we got an email from the CCO, Patricia Wexler, on November 9th, and we were asking for a phone call with them that we could record. And they said they wanted to avoid a phone call that we could record. All right? Then they said on November 9th that the account was closed because of a heightened consumer risk profile triggered by my involvement because they had designated me as a politically exposed person. Now, okay, I'm politically exposed. I confess this. I've been in Congress, the Senate, governor, I'm politically exposed, but that is actually a legal term of art that applies only to foreign elected officials and not to domestic elected officials. So that one didn't work either. We'd put a shareholder resolution up to the J.P. Morgan Chase annual shareholders, to which the CEO, Jamie Dimon, said, quote, no apologies are necessary, no corrective action is necessary, a point he later in February 13, 2025, in meeting with Republican members of the Senate Banking Committee, said, well, we don't debank people because of political or religious affiliation, but there are a lot of things that can be fixed. We should fix them. The rules and requirements are so onerous, and it does cause people to be debanked. In my opinion, we should not be debanked. So we're back and forth a little bit there as well. You've had a long day. I want to... this still isn't resolved. I've had 5 different reasons. I still don't know why. I think Chase really ought to go internally and figure out why did this happen and prevent this from happening in the future. They have made some changes in their process of what they put on forward. My suggestions to you, though, are that this is something that has been fairly rampant. When we went public with ours, I got contacted by somewhere between 10 to 20 other groups that had been debanked, deplatformed, but most of them were debanked. They were generally religiously affiliated or groups that this had happened to. And they said they had not gone public because they went and found another bank, and we did too. We went out and found Bank of America, took us. We've not had any problem with Bank of America. But they didn't want to go public because they thought it would hurt their fundraising. It would make it more difficult. It was another barrier they were going to have to break through. And I was going, this is the very reason we formed the NCRF, so you wouldn't have these sort of barriers to break through in the first place. Why should somebody, because they have values that may not be in the cultural mainstream at the present time, have any barriers? We are enriched as a society because we have people like that. We have Amish in our state that I think, God bless them, they are absolutely wonderful people. I don't operate as an Amish person. The Orthodox Jewish community, I think, is an absolute fabulous addition to the American society, an important piece of it. I'm not Orthodox Jewish, but we are enriched because we have it. We should make it easy and accommodate their working in the society, not make it harder. So my recommendation, just real briefly, Tennessee has passed a bill on a transparency law that on major banks that they would have to provide transparent rules as to why they debank somebody. It applies to banks of over 100 billion in size. Also, Idaho and Florida has done something similar in this. I think you should try to codify President Trump's executive order 14331, the guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. It's one thing to do an executive order. It's very important. It's key to do that. But if it's just an executive order, we all know that doesn't necessarily last in the next administration. That should be tried to be codified. And if nothing else, at this point in time, I would try to get it in an appropriations bill to where it's an annual issue, but still you could get it through. Getting over that 60-vote threshold in the Senate is just really tough to be able to do. But you could get it in appropriation bills, particularly with this Speaker of the House, who is a religious freedom lawyer, brilliant, wonderful man, and asked him and said, we would like some of these put in appropriations bills to move this forward. And then finally, this isn't debanking, but I run a monthly meeting of the National Council for Religious Freedom, and we get religious freedom activists on that call each month, and anybody in the audience wants to join it, get a hold of me, or you can get a hold of it. We are seeing people de-insuranced, deplatformed, can't get accreditation for colleges. They'll comment on this. Can't use multi-listing as a real estate agent because they were an outspoken person of faith, put something forward. Can't get funds from community foundations because they're affiliated with a pro-life group. We've had those specific items all brought up on this call by various individuals. And it's more than debanking. It's a cultural issue. Needs to be gone at broadly, but you can get at this debanking, and I think particularly through the transparency route. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, Senator, Governor. And I was just sitting here thinking, if that can happen to you, think about the average person on the street that has no chance. No chance. No chance. Hermione? Who's next?
Lacey.
Lacey. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't look at my list. I didn't, and I couldn't see the name card. So.
That's all right. Well, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for everything. It's definitely going to be a story that passes on to my great-grandchildren and beyond. So I used to be a flight attendant for Alaska Airlines. It was a job that I absolutely loved. As a flight attendant, I was able to share life with so many, from hurts and loss to celebrations and wins. I once worked a flight where we were simultaneously taking a grieving family who was transporting their recently deceased mother to her home and final resting place, alongside a fraternity on their way to spring break in Cabo. So as a Christian, I was able to use those brief moments on the plane to serve and love others the best that I could. I enjoyed the diversity I encountered daily, from the people on the plane to the circumstances to my coworkers. And I particularly loved Alaska Airlines because for years it encouraged a culture of open communication. But unfortunately, all that has changed. In February of 2021, Alaska posted an article on their internal message board, which was titled, "Alaska Supports the Equality Act." So the Equality Act was proposed legislation about sexual orientation, gender identity, and religious freedom that did not pass. But after reading the article, which is private to employees and not visible to customers or the public, there was a button that invited us as employees to be able to submit a comment. So being a conservative Christian, I had concerns about what Alaska's support for the act meant for me and as an employee. So I asked the question, as a company, do you think it's possible to regulate morality? And that one simple question got me fired. So shortly after posting the question, Alaska took me off all of my scheduled trips and called me in for an investigative meeting. They were very elusive about the details surrounding the meeting and informed me that I was to speak to no one about it. It was incredibly isolating and intimidating. In the initial meeting and throughout the entirety of the termination process, which took about 2 months of my life, I repeatedly explained that I'm opposed to discrimination, but there were things that I disagreed with about the Equality Act. However, Alaska fired me, explaining in my notice of discharge that, quote, Defining gender identity or sexual orientation as a moral issue is a discriminatory statement, end quote. So this confirmed to me that I was being targeted because of my religious beliefs about morality. I later learned that another flight attendant named Marley Brown was terminated at the same time. She also had posted concerns about how the Equality Act would impact people of faith and about the safety and privacy of women and girls in women's spaces. Alaska called both of our comments hateful, discriminatory, and offensive. They said that it was discriminatory to use the term opposite sex because that implied that there were only two sexes. Both Marley and I had great relationships with all of our coworkers, regardless of their beliefs and background, but that didn't matter. I knew that what had happened to me wasn't right. Companies can't fire religious employees simply for asking questions stemming from their religious beliefs. That's why I'm so very thankful that God led me to First Liberty Institute, who agreed to represent both me and my former coworker, Marley. It's with this lawsuit that I found even more detail about the extent of the religious discrimination and the hostility towards people of faith displayed both by Alaska Airlines and then also my union, the Association of Flight Attendants. So the union, who is supposed to protect me in cases of discrimination with Alaska, had been in contact with the airlines from the very beginning, encouraging and expressing support for my termination. The union president reported our comments, complaining to the airline about our religious beliefs not being inclusive. And in those communications between the company and the union president said that he hated me, and another union representative quoted, quote, "Can we please get somebody to shut down comments or put Marley and Lacey in a burlap bag and drop them in a well," end quote. Alaska Airlines was also hostile towards our religious beliefs. One of Alaska Airlines' lawyers wrote, quote, "We should stay away from everyone has the right to have their own beliefs. In this case, because the belief is actually discrimination. Employees actually do not have the right to believe that LGBTQ rights are immoral." When my supervisor was asked where employees would be allowed to mention moral beliefs opposed to the LGBTQ plus activity, she responded, quote, "At home, without any other employees being there to hear it. That would be okay," end quote. Alaska Airlines' hostility towards my religious beliefs was particularly surprising because of its old reputation as a faith-friendly airline. For over 30 years, Alaska Airlines included a prayer card with a verse from Psalms with each meal card. We've got examples here. It reads, "I will praise God's name in song and glorify him with thanksgiving." Psalm 69:30. The airline stopped that practice in 2012, right before I started there in 2014, but it was the openness to faith as one of the first things that drew me to Alaska. So as you can imagine, when I was fired, my life was entirely upended. I was uncertain of the future and doubting myself. I wondered if speaking up on behalf of my own moral conscience had even been worth it. I'd only lost my income and my health insurance. I lost a job I loved. I'm just really hydrated. It just comes out in all places. I lost my security and I lost my future. One reason, get it together. One reason I took the job as a flight attendant was that I have siblings who live overseas. So losing my job meant that I also lost the ability to stay as connected with them. My husband and I had dreams of traveling. Sorry. Once we had kids, but we lost that dream too. I felt bullied and hated by a company that told me that they valued diversity, and yet when I expressed even a whisper of my own religious beliefs, I was fired. And then because of the uncertainty of our financial situation, my husband and I felt compelled to move across country to a more fiscally affordable area, leaving friends and family behind and having to start all over in a new area. So I'm hoping that as people hear my story, they understand the need and importance of protecting the rights of employees to respectfully share their religious and moral opinions in the workplace. Otherwise, religious employees and even a respectful conversation about religion in the workplace might go the way that Alaska's prayer cards did and just simply disappear. Fortunately, we do have Title VII, which was brought up, of the Civil Rights Act, which protects us against religious discrimination in the workplace. However, many do not know their rights and are bullied into silencing their moral conscience in an attempt to hold to their jobs and security. But I go back to what Founding Father Benjamin Franklin said. Those who give up essential liberty in an attempt to secure safety will surely result in the loss of both. So thank you for the time to hear my story. I hope it sheds light on both understanding our religious protections in the workplace and also in reinforcing the importance of protecting those rights of employees to respectfully share their religious and moral opinions in the workplace. I'll end with a favorite quote by another founding father, John Jay. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they are violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lacey. Their loss. It's Alaskans Airline, their loss. They were I know you suffered, but they're the big loser because they lost you. Hermione, now.
Good afternoon. I love this woman here, my true warrior. God put us together. I thank the Commission for this opportunity to speak and share my story of religious discrimination in the private sector. I still remember the joy of serving fans at Madison Square Garden, chatting with families, sharing laughs over game nights, feeling part of something bigger. That joy turned to heartbreak when my deeply held religious convictions about the sanctity of life as a Catholic made me unable to comply with the vaccine mandate. In March 2020, during the COVID-19 outbreak, I was a seasonal hospitality server at 3 New York City venues. All 3 shut down for guests and most staff for nearly a year. In February 2021, venues reopened with strict restrictions. I was among the few who quickly returned, enduring daily COVID-19 testing and guidelines to help reopen at 10% capacity initially, building up to 100% by spring. As a tip employee, I often made less than I would have if I stayed home and collected unemployment plus stimulus checks, but I was eager to work. In May 2021, Madison Square Garden announced a vaccine mandate. Be vaccinated by July or request a religious or medical accommodation. I submitted a detailed religious accommodation request on time as a union member with Unite Here Local 100, but it was denied. My religious accommodation clearly stated my Catholic beliefs with supporting information and references on the Church's clear teaching on the sanctity of life and how the 3 vaccines violated my beliefs. My body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, and I could not, in good conscience, inject something I believe violated that sacred trust, a conviction rooted in prayer and scripture that I hold sincerely. The union informed me that every religious accommodation request to Madison Square Garden was rejected with a templated response. The company then stated that unvaccinated employees were resigning and removed our ability to work. I quickly responded that I was not resigning, but my response was ignored. The company never formally terminated me or others like me, but locked us out of the scheduling system and no longer responded. The union promised to file grievances, but did not. This was my first religious freedom violation. Worse came in August 2021, when New York City's Key to NYC mandate required vaccination for private sector employees at indoor venues by September 13. Because of this, I was unable to work at the Barclays Center. That mandate was especially discriminatory. It exempted non-resident performers, athletes, and their staff, people in the same buildings where I worked. Yet employees like me with sincere religious objections were barred, while unvaccinated athletes and artists and their entourages were allowed in. I watched as unvaccinated professional athletes and performers entered the same arena where I was barred. Madison Square Garden even advocated for those exemptions after rejecting ours. My last venue was Yankee Stadium, where an outdoor area allowed me to continue working briefly. The onslaught of discrimination and persecution at this point only increased because of an emergency executive order was issued by New York City officials in December 2021, with even tighter restrictions. Subsequently, I lost my job at Yankee Stadium. My employer did not offer us a religious accommodation. As a resident in New York City, I faced consumer discrimination from the vaccine restrictions. From September 2021, unvaccinated people could not enter indoor restaurants, theaters, or venues. No religious exemption applied there. For my Jewish brethren, this invoked painful historical echoes of exclusion based on not having papers. Officials ignored religious sensitivities for months, while exemptions for performers and athletes continued. By January 2022, I had lost all 3 jobs where I had worked for over a decade, my apartment and stability. I had no choice but to leave the state, moving to Georgia to live with my dad. In March 2022, New York City officials lifted vaccine requirements for patrons and gave exemptions to resident athletes and performers where I worked, but did not give those exemptions for workers like me. We were demonized and ostracized for upholding constitutional religious freedom. I continued fighting with emails and letters to union and employers. I also filed charges with the NLRB. I found out after the deadline that the EEOC could have represented me. It was impossible for me and other private sector employees to fight a very long, expensive legal battle. For example, to this day, cases that unvaccinated public sector New York City workers won years ago are still held and tied up in appellate courts. The city dropped its private sector mandates on November 1st, 2022. I returned to the Barclays Center that same month. It took over a year to return to Yankee Stadium. Unfortunately, Madison Square Garden never brought us back. I still endure the financial burdens for my decision. For example, I do not have health insurance, and I'm unable to obtain affordable housing due to the permanent loss of income from losing my 3rd job. When the mandates were in place, I did not want to give in to the temptation of obtaining false vaccination documentation to work, because as an American, I have the right to my religious accommodation under the law. Our laws protect our religious freedom, and it should be fought for despite the cost. I and other workers in New York City, like me, have permanently lost jobs, homes, full pensions, scholarships, medical benefits, and more. Our 401ks, savings, and other assets have been depleted, and debt skyrocketed with little to no justice in pursuit of our religious freedom. Despite the pain, my faith sustains me, and it still does. I share this not just for myself, but for every believer facing similar choices today and tomorrow. Religious liberty must never cost a person's livelihood, home, or dignity in America. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the panel? Questions from the panel for our witnesses? Carrie?
Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
No, go ahead.
Okay, okay. Wow, your story is really sad. This should never happen in America. Next month, we're going to have a hearing on this issue, religious liberty and healthcare, and I'm sure we're going to hear from people like you who were denied religious exemptions. There's children that are denied religious exemptions to attend school. Discrimination is rampant just because you don't receive an injection. It's wrong, and it's un-American, so I will say that publicly. What can we recommend to the president? The damage has already been done, but what can we do? Your story is so sad. It's heartbreaking. It should never have happened to you. Hearing you say that you've lost your home, you've lost your jobs, you know, your life was in shambles, I'm sure, because of this. And for so many people, they just want us to move on. I promise you, we're not going to move on from this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that that's the sentiment. Just move on, right? One is that, first of all, people like myself, we don't have any legal means, because one of the things I kind of noted was the EEOC. So since I'm a union employee, right, and this is in all fairness to them, I'm supposed to go to my union, right, and get my legal battles fought. They didn't even file a grievance. They're contractually, they are supposed to negotiate on my behalf. They never did that. So Local 100 represents me in all 3 jobs. So that was never done. And for others, I mean, my case is hard, but there are even people in New York City, which is harder. But a good example is that we have a lot of cases, especially with the city workers, that, you know, the sanitation workers won in 2022, still held up in appellate courts in New York City. So, I mean, we do have some great cases that are being won nationwide, but in New York City, it's like we're forgotten. We really don't know who to go to and who to turn to. So I'm so grateful, you do not understand, to be on this commission, not only for myself, but for all of us in New York City, because we don't have a place to turn. Even the reinstatements that they promised our city workers in December of 2025 is still being held up. You know, there's a difference of being rehired and a reinstatement because your pension is associated with it. So it's a great evil that we still continue to this day. We are going through this. So I just want to just say that.
If I could quickly respond to that, I think one of the keys here would be to create private causes of action. You know, the left has done this brilliantly for years, where you create the private causes of action so that people can pursue things in their own, not just the government. And we should really look at this area of law to create private causes of action so that people like you, Susanna, can pursue that and have lawyers there to advocate for them.
Yeah, the Title VII actually covers this. So you can. And every lawsuit we filed for refusal of religious exemption, we've won all over the country. So, you know, it just shouldn't happen. And it happened to so many people. And so many people didn't know that they had the ability to do anything about it. And they just had such damage. I thank you for telling your story. And Lacey, thank you for standing up, because I think your case is going to affect a lot of people who work in this country. When the company says internally, we want your feedback, and then you give Christian feedback and they fire you, you can't do that in this country. So thank you. And then Ambassador Brownback, do you know, what is the law not able to get through on debanking in the federal? Is it the 60-vote margin? There not enough support? So like if we put a recommendation in here to pass the law to stop debanking based upon discrimination against religion or those type of things, is there not enough votes in Congress now? Have you had experience as you're looking at this issue?
Yeah, I don't know how you'd get it through right now on that 60-vote threshold in the Senate, other than tailor it in narrow and put it in an appropriations bill, so you could get an annual bill that's got to pass and make it a key negotiating thing. A number of in the pro-life movement earlier, the early bills we got were annual riders on an appropriations bill, and then you got a vehicle that you can get it through with. But I'd narrow focus, and you got a Speaker of the House that would be, I think, very favorably disposed towards doing something like that.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I didn't look to my left.
Well, it wasn't your fault. This thing goes off after 5 minutes. First of all, Ambassador, Senator, Congressman, Governor Brownback, Thank you for the many years that you've dedicated to those who are affected by things like this, and for you two ladies, what you've gone through. I just want to make you aware that there are some private sector remedies for debanking, for instance. The Old Glory Bank was established exactly for that reason and is growing very rapidly. And full disclosure, I was one of the founders of that bank, but there was a reason that we get involved in these things. And that's really going to be the answer, I think, to all of these things, is we all have spheres of influence. And if we fight, I think we will win.
To Lacey and Hermione, we've had a lot of testimonies similar to yours. In fact, we had a Navy SEAL in our last hearing because of the vaccination for religious reasons. He was basically dismissed and lost his pension and his health care. But if someone said it was for a medical reason, they were allowed to continue. The money loss is hard. But I think what's hard is we always hear how much people love their job. And when you take away somebody's love of what they do, I can tell Hermione, you loved to walk through those stands. You loved to interact with the fans. I can just tell. And you loved your passengers. You helped that one passenger. You loved your passengers. That's even more cruel than taking away your money. So thank you for having your courage, and thank you for coming today. You are dismissed. Thank you. Members, this wraps up our hearing. Our next hearing is March 16th back here at the museum. And this has been an incredible day. Thank you for your patience and all the time you put in today and listening closely and great questions, and I appreciate you all. We're dismissed until March 16th. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.